Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck!
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GBNews, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Monday, the 3rd of March. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Keir Starmer seeks a coalition of the willing as he offers his plan for peace in Ukraine. But are you willing to cough up yet more money for this war? The Prime Minister will deliver his assessment of a turbulent weekend to the Commons this very afternoon.
He will indeed, and of course this comes as calls grow. They're growing for Donald Trump's UK state visit to be cancelled following that very public spat with Zelensky. Is the president's stance in Ukraine enough to really damage the special relationship? Is it not a bit absurd to cancel a state visit over this? We'll be hearing from a former British ambassador to the United States.
And we'll also be speaking to the bionic Lord McKinley, who has slammed Ed Miliband's net zero agenda, saying it's spreading like sepsis. It comes with new research that Britain's energy transition has made families poorer.
And he should know.
What a weekend it has been. I have to say, when we got off air on Friday, I was looking forward to watching Martin Daubney's programme, seeing the sort of diplomacy play out in the White House, seeing the meeting between Zelensky and Donald Trump.
What, you mean you weren't looking forward to going to the pub?
I went to the pub later. But my goodness me, I don't think anyone could have predicted it playing out in the way it did. And that rapidly changed what happened in London on Sunday. This emergency summit went from being a nicety to something of much, much greater global importance.
Oh, yeah, it gave Keir Starmer the perfect opportunity to act as the great mediator of all sides. Whether they've actually achieved anything, I'm not so sure. I mean, Friday night, I actually was then back on air, doing the sort of almost instant reaction to what we'd seen. It was all going rather well, wasn't it? On the Friday night. It was all going rather well for about the first 40-odd minutes. Bit polite, little bits of tension here and there. You could kind of sense it was brewing and brewing. If they just stopped it, you know, at about 40 minutes, they were already going off. They were going to have a press conference later anyway. They didn't need to be asking all these questions. It could have just ended in that be that. Minerals deal signed, negotiations done, on our way to peace, hopefully. But alas, that wasn't to be.
It wasn't to be, but, I mean, is it still salvageable? Of course it's still salvageable.
Well, Zelensky certainly thinks it is.
Zelensky thinks it is. Donald Trump says he's welcome back in the White House when he's ready to talk about peace. I mean, I don't know if that was a backhanded comment there, but there is going to be further talk. And what the Prime Minister says in the House of Commons this afternoon will matter very, very much indeed. He's going to have to give a big statement, lots of questions from MPs about what actually happened behind closed doors with those 19 leaders.
But will they all just be patting Keir Starmer on the back? Because I want to know where this 1.6 billion is actually going to go, how we're going to be able to afford it, how much of our defence budget is it going to take up, and for how long we're going to be committing this type of money, how many troops and for how long we're going to be committing these troops. He says in the event of a peace plan, well, where are we with that peace plan? There's a lot of, ego going on at the moment, and I just wonder where exactly we are. Hopefully there'll be some pertinent questions asked.
Absolutely, and some answers this very afternoon. We want your views as well. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved. All to come after your latest news headlines with Sophia.
Emily, Tom, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 12 o'clock. These are your headlines. Sir Keir Starmer is expected to return to the Commons today for the first time since his high-stakes diplomatic action across the Atlantic and in London. The Prime Minister told European leaders we are at a crossroads in history. At an emergency summit in London last night, European nations met with the aim to secure lasting peace in Ukraine.
The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air, together with others. Europe must do the heavy lifting.
Sir Keir Starmer announced a 4-point plan to work with Ukraine to end the war and defend the country from Russia. The UK, France and other countries will step up their efforts in a coalition of the willing and seek to involve the US in their support for Ukraine. Meanwhile, in a royal show of solidarity, Zelensky received a warm welcome at Sandringham as he met the King last night. Ukraine's president stressed his gratitude to the US and praised European unity after the intense 3 days of diplomacy. It comes 2 days after a fiery exchange between the Ukrainian leader and US President Donald Trump. Volodymyr Zelensky has said he is still ready to sign a US-Ukraine minerals deal after leaving the White House without it being agreed. Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for the Armed Forces, Luke Pollard, told GB News the UK must act as a bridge between the US and Europe.
Really important that we stand with our allies. The US is our most important security partner. I see it every day as a defence minister, but it's also right that at these difficult times that the UK acts as that bridge between the USA and our friends in Europe to bring together the plan for a lasting and durable peace in Ukraine, because all of us, President Trump, the UK Prime Minister, President Zelensky, want to see a peace that lasts, a deal that can be stuck to, so the Ukrainian people can know that they will never be invaded by Russia again.
Meanwhile, Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs, Wendy Morton, called for more clarity from the Prime Minister.
It's about very much the UK building on the work, the role that we've had in terms of Ukraine, the start of the war, and even before that, very much as a close ally of Ukraine, but also as a really strong ally of the US as well. And this is about finding a way forward. But equally, I think it's also important that, for shadow ministers like myself, for Her Majesty's opposition, we need a little bit more detail and a little bit more clarity about what was agreed at the summit, and so we're hoping that we will see that this afternoon when the Prime Minister comes to the House of Commons.
Elsewhere, the King has met with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at Sandringham House. The private audience this morning came just a day after Charles welcomed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to his Norfolk estate. King Charles was pictured shaking hands with the Canadian leader, with Mr Trudeau warmly clasping the King's hands with both of his. In other news, a police investigation has been launched after a member of the public discovered human remains in Stoke-on-Trent. Police were called to reports of the skeletal discovery on land near Festival Park on Sunday afternoon. The area is cordoned off as police examine the scene. Now, a third man has been charged with murder over a house fire that killed a mother and her 3 young children in Bradford last year. 29-year-old Bryony Gowith, along with 9-year-old Dennis D. Birtle, 5-year-old Oscar Birtle and 22-year-old Aubrey Birtle, who were killed in the fire on the 21st of August 2024. Sharaz Ali from Bradford has been charged with 4 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. He will appear at Bradford Magistrates Court today. And the independent film Anora swept the Oscars last night, winning 5 awards, including Best Picture and Best Actress for lead star Mikey Madison. Hollywood stars descended on Los Angeles for the 97th Oscar Awards for the biggest night in film. Meanwhile, the Brutalist star Adrian Brody spoke of anti-Semitism and racism as he picked up the Best Actor gong at the Oscars.
Please, I'm wrapping up. I will wrap up. Please turn the music off. I've done this before. Thank you. It's not my first rodeo, but I will be brief. I will not be egregious, I promise. I pray for a healthier and a happier and a more inclusive world. And I believe if the past can teach us anything, it's a reminder to not let hate go unchecked.
Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's now 9 minutes past midday, and this afternoon, the Prime Minister will take to his feet in the House of Commons to deliver his assessment of a turbulent weekend, telling MPs what the emergency summit with European leaders at Lancaster House actually decided, and his meeting with Donald Trump.
Yes, the Prime Minister will likely face, fierce questioning on how he's handled the US President, the offer of a prestigious second state visit, which has proven rather controversial since events on Friday night, fresh aid to Ukraine, of course, and whether we will actually see British troops on the ground in Ukraine for the first time since the days of Florence Nightingale.
Well, at the emergency summit yesterday afternoon, Sir Keir Starmer committed again to British boots on the ground in the event of a peace deal.
The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting.
Europe must do the heavy lifting. Now, we know European countries have depended on the United States for a lot of their security. There are 100,000 US troops stationed in Europe, mostly in Germany, I believe. Can we really do the heavy lifting? Are these European leaders actually saying we're going to pump huge amounts into defence and actually get the military involved in this war?
It's
Is that what they're saying?
Only half a dozen EU countries actually meet that 2% target for NATO spending. The rest of them are all below that. The UK is one of the few countries in this part of the world that does meet that spend. But of course, we talk to the military establishment in the UK, they say that even that is not enough. And the General Secretary of NATO was talking about actually perhaps a new target, maybe a 3% target, maybe 3.5%. I mean, we are going to see a rearming Europe over the course of the coming years. And how does that change things domestically, politically?
It's just very easy for European leaders, including our own, to stand there and promise away British taxpayers' money, to say we stand with Ukraine, as opposed to that awful, Donald Trump over in the United States. But actually delivering on what they're saying, they're saying, oh, we'll have troops involved in the event of a peace deal. Well, what is Europe's peace plan? What is Europe's peace plan? Donald Trump is clearly trying to negotiate. And yes, the minerals deal has not yet come through following Friday night's debacle. But I just wonder what exactly these European leaders are going to do.
Well, shall we get some more on this now with the chief political correspondent at The Times, Aubrey Allegretti, who's joining us from our Westminster studio. Aubrey, this is, of course, a very difficult moment internationally, and the UK is trying to play this role of a bridge between Europe and the United States. How are we faring?
It seems like fairly well so far. Keir Starmer has at least convinced sort of Donald Trump to give him enough time to try and go away and pull together European leaders from across the continent, as well as Canada's Justin Trudeau. And so it would seem that the US president hasn't sort of shut down this potential avenue. Keir Starmer successfully managed to convince him that all sides really are interested in securing a peace deal. It's just that they might differ in their approach. And that's because he knows that really it's impossible for the Europeans to be going it alone in terms of trying to, A, support any kind of ceasefire deal that is just enforced by European troops, or B, continuing to let Ukraine fight against Russia, but only with the support of European money, kit and training as well. So I think there is a sort of acknowledgement that actually America's buy-in is essential for this, and that is very much playing up to Donald Trump's role as the statesman who can the world leaders can try and present to him that he can be this sort of person who might get the Peace Prize one day. It's working in his favour.
Yeah, and also in a way, Keir Starmer and some of the other European leaders are doing exactly what Donald Trump wants. He's wanted them to take more responsibility, wanted Europe to take more responsibility for its own security. He's made that clear time and time again. Since Friday night, in the eyes of European leaders, that's become even more pertinent. Keir Starmer saying Europe must do the heavy lifting. He wasn't saying that, only a matter of days ago.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the government basically parked the decision about when to raise defence spending to 2.5% of GDP when it came into office. It launched this strategic defence review, which basically kicked the issue into the long grass. And so we have heard a lot more now about Keir Starmer's plans to raise defence spending to 2.5% by 2027, 2028, and other European countries starting to follow suit. So, yes, Donald Trump is very much getting his way here, which is kind of moving the burden away from America to look after Europe onto those European countries themselves, some of whom have taken a long time and been dragging their feet to get to 2% in the first place. Now, I think we'll hear quite a lot more about this later in the week. On Thursday, we expect there to be a European Council summit at which lots of the European leaders will attend. The UK, obviously no longer being part of the EU, won't be formally represented, but I would expect that we'll be quite sort of close in terms of coordinating with them. And Ursula von der Leyen, who was obviously at the summit in London yesterday, I think we will start to hear a lot more about how rhetoric isn't enough, politicians need to match it with reality. But they're always balancing those difficult decisions about international sort of defence spending versus the domestic pressures in their own country. And so just as the conversations are happening here about whether or not, say, taxes would need to rise in order to match a funding for increase for defence up to 5% as Donald Trump wants it, those conversations are being replicated across the European Union. So by no means no easy and short-term answers. The investment in this is going to take a long time.
A very key week ahead. Well, Aubrey Allegretti of The Times, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Now, delighted to say that joining us now is the former British ambassador to the United States, Lord Kim Darroch. Kim, thanks so much for being with us this afternoon. I wanted to first start off with a question of diplomacy and international affairs, because yesterday the current ambassador to the United States, Lord Mandelson, took to the American news media to almost freewheel, as some people have seen it, on British foreign policy. Let's take a listen to this.
And the Europeans, George, too, they need to back the calls for a ceasefire. And by the way, I think that Ukraine should be the first to commit to a ceasefire and defy the Russians to follow.
Well, that comment's proved quite controversial, because this morning the Ministry of Defence have come out to say that is not, in fact, British policy, that Ukraine should be the first to offer this ceasefire. Lord Darroch, what's going on? Is the UK government just that disjointed?
I don't think it's that disjointed. Look, first of all, who knows when you're on a live interview and you get an unexpected question, what you're going to say, and you have to think on your feet. And sometimes, whoever is doing it, it comes out a bit differently from what people have heard before. Second, once you get a senior political figure as an ambassador, and that is what this government wanted to do, you're getting someone who can phone up the Prime Minister or the Defence Secretary or the Foreign Secretary direct, and you get someone who is in a different position from a mere official in terms of the kind of things that he can say. I mean, Lord Mandelson has already, who I, by the way, think is a very clever and substantial political figure. He's in a position where he can say things that sometimes will go a little bit beyond the established government line, because that's what he is. He was deputy prime minister not that long ago, so it's different when you're him. He already does a lot more media than most British ambassadors have done in the past, and this kind of moment is going to happen.
Yeah, it's a bit odd, though, for him to take a completely different stance. I wouldn't go that far. But to say something that no member of the government has said in this country about Ukraine having to be the first to go for a ceasefire, I mean, that seems to have come out of almost nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what was the reason for him to say that, or quite what the question was beforehand. But, events are moving really fast, as you guys will have noticed. We get summits set up at kind of 48 hours notice. The picture changes a lot. And so, stuff is going to happen and we need to move on.
Now, of course, you were ambassador at the start of Donald Trump's first term in the White House, and this is an incredibly difficult operation. I mean, we saw how ruddy good the embassy in the United States is with regard to the smooth running of the meeting on Thursday. I mean, it couldn't have gone much better for Keir Starmer, really. There is now, however, political controversy around the offer of a second state visit. What's the sort of diplomatic reasoning behind this?
Well, thank you for the compliment of the British Embassy. I think they did do very well, and it was a very well organised and choreographed visit, much better than many expected it to go. On the second state visit, look, there's a real established process, and a lot of thought goes into extending an invitation. So this will have been thought about a lot in Whitehall. The palace would have been consulted heavily as part of this process, as part of this decision. And the decision was taken, and the Prime Minister extended the invitation, as you all saw in front of the cameras with the President. Now we've done it, they must have calculated that there would be controversial moments between now and when it happens. Usually these things don't happen until a year or two after the invitation is extended. So they would have calculated this, that there might be some ups and downs on the way, especially with this President, given the often controversial things he says. Now we've done it. I think we should stick with it and just ride out whatever storms emerge between now and then, because you must have had to think through all of this before taking this decision.
Yes, there does seem to have been a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, perhaps, to what took place on Friday night, with many a serious politician saying, "Oh, this is the time to pull the state visit. We can't have Donald Trump over here," etc., which I thought was a little much.
I agree with that, Emily. I mean, just on that point, very quickly. I mean, it may all go wrong on this Ukraine peace effort. It may. I hope it doesn't, but it may all go wrong. It's a very difficult thing to accomplish. On the other hand, if it succeeds, and Donald Trump is the architect of it or plays a big part in delivering it, then things will look very different, and the state visit invitation will look very different then. So let's wait and see what happens.
Well, that brings me to my next question, or indeed a thought, is that at the moment we have Keir Starmer saying Europe needs to do the heavy lifting. This has all happened since Friday, since that very strange meeting between Zelensky and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and the like. Europe seemed to be mobilising a little, at least in terms of rhetoric. We're putting more money towards this and everything. But is it still the United States that can actually broker a peace deal? Because we're talking about, helping to protect peace down the line once it's already been achieved. But is it actually Donald Trump, who we're all relying on, to actually bring about this peace deal?
Look, it's a good point that in the end, Europe can play a role, and it now seems that we and the French are going to hold the pen to try and put together a plan. I was hearing there wasn't really a comprehensive US plan at this stage, so let's have a go ourselves at doing it. But we're going to need to do it together, and in the end, it will come down. I hope the first stage is that Europe and the US agree on a set of proposals. But the next stage is those have to be negotiated with Putin. And in the end, that is going to be, I think, a task for Donald Trump. So it's kind of crucial that we get beyond those events of Friday night. I mean, they look very bad on TV. It did look a bit as if, or more than a bit as if Trump and Vance were ganging up on the Ukrainian president, who is doing an extraordinary job in very difficult circumstances. But in the end, it will be a Trump-Putin meeting, I suspect, which makes or breaks this process. And so, of course, we need to rebuild the bridges with Donald Trump and with the US administration. We need to work together on this. Otherwise, we're not going to succeed.
Really, really fascinating stuff. Well, Lord Darroch, thanks so much for being with us here on Good Afternoon Britain. Really appreciate your time and indeed your expertise on these matters.
Yeah, very sensible thoughts there. Interesting. Right, well, moving on. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up, yes. We're going to be speaking to the bionic Lord McKinley, who has slammed Ed Miliband's net zero agenda, saying it's spreading like sepsis, and he should go.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Well, a new poll commissioned by Channel 4 shows that more than half of Gen Z believe that Britain should be ruled by a dictator. Seriously, they actually said that. Well, 1 in 3 would want an army. What's the army in charge? 1 in 3 want martial law.
There's something on the idea of some form of strong leadership. They have looked at British politics. They have looked at the politics in which they grow up in. And they see failures at the democratic level. They see a weak, a soft, a centre that doesn't do anything, makes promises and fails to deliver them. They see nothing actually happening. And they also see a future where they have no democratic engagement because they're never going to have a house. They're never going to have a family. Why would they? Why would they be able to? So the idea of having somebody strong to come through and blow away the cobwebs of our current system, I can see that being attractive. When I grew up, I was talking to not that old men and women who had been through the war, who knew what dictatorship was. Up until the 70s, we were in the Cold War. People knew what dictatorship was. They knew people being locked up, being sent to Siberia. They knew what this meant. And I don't think anybody under the age of 34 actually has a clue. It's all the other side of the world. It's in North Korea, it's in China. It's not here, and it's not part of their lived experience. And that's a big change.
And I wonder, actually, Nigel, if a lot of these people think, I don't know, like Donald Trump's a dictator. He got elected with a huge mandate. Do they understand what dictators is? Or, actually, are young people just so listless? They're so feeble-minded, they need to be told what to do and how to live.
I certainly think that Gwen's right about there's a disillusionment with democracy and the results of it. The idea that a dictatorship is the answer to it or having the military rule over us is obvious nonsense.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 26 minutes past 12. Now, in other news, Ed Miliband's net zero agenda is spreading like sepsis, according to the former MP Lord McKinley, who himself underwent a quadruple amputation following his own sepsis infection.
Well, it comes as a new report has found that Britain's net zero drive has made families poorer, despite the Chancellor's claim that there is no trade-off between economic growth and decarbonisation.
OK, well, joining us now is Lord Craig McKinley. Thank you very much indeed for joining guiding us. So go on, make the comparison then between net zero and sepsis for us.
Well, when you recognise that you're very, very unwell, I think I recognised my unwellness a little bit later in the day, you can end up close to death. I had only a 5% chance of survival. Now, I would say the chance of survival of our country's high energy industry is hovering around the 5%, but it is recoverable. I'm here to speak to you because my condition was recovered. So I think the condition of the UK in terms of massively high energy prices, deindustrialisation, no more steel being made, even Stoke Pottery is starting to close down and move production abroad. It is recoverable, but we need to act now. We need to get off the mad net zero pathway. We actually need to get rid of the Climate Change Act, or amend it massively, Climate Change Act of 2008, and actually go back on a pathway where most of the rest of the world is going. You only have to look at Trump's America to realise that they're going for cheap energy. China's never got off it with their building of a new coal power station every week. But we are now uniquely daft, uniquely stupid in pursuing the net zero agenda. We will win the race because everybody else has simply given up. So that's my new message. Well, it's the same message I've had for years. It's just I've now got a position as the director of the Global Warming Policy Foundation to get us back onto a sensible pathway.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would sort of see a lot of sense in what you're saying. You know, if it was the most economically rational thing to do to decarbonise, well, we wouldn't need mandates and taxes and bans and all the rest of it, because the market would do that. Clearly, it's more expensive to do. Otherwise, you wouldn't need all of the government intervention that we're seeing. But the case that Ed Miliband makes, the Climate and Energy Secretary, of course, he says that we are currently at greater risk to big influxes and changes in the global price of gas. You know, the UK was hit harder than most, harder than France, for example, which has most of its electricity from nuclear power. Because we're so reliant on gas and oil, when things like Ukraine take place, when the Middle East has another war, well, our prices are uniquely vulnerable. What do you make of that case?
Well, unlike many other countries, we have got a potential supply, a good supply of domestic oil and gas. We're turning off the taps in the North Sea. We've seen the activism of late where Jackdaw and Rosebank and others are under judicial threat of just not opening. They could play a very powerful role. We've got the potential for a lot of fracked gas fields across the UK. Now, arguably, the one that was tried near Blackpool may have been deemed to be a little bit close to a population centre, but there are plenty of areas where extracted fracked gas could be making a massive contribution to Britain's energy requirements. Because what we're doing at the moment, we're going to need gas for a very, very long time. We'll simply be importing it from abroad. Just take Norway. A very good friendly neighbour, it's extracting gas out of the same North Sea basin that we could be so doing. And we are paying Norway £30 billion every year to have gas from them. Yeah. We're spending $10 billion a year with Qatar. We'll probably be spending $10 billion or more shortly in Trump's America, because they're going for drill, baby, drill. Needn't be like that. We could have our own domestic gas, our own energy security. Because I cannot see that relying on Chinese-made solar panels, and we know that solar panels, by their very nature, don't produce at night. I don't think you need a degree to understand that one. And also wind turbines, which have a sense of unreliability. This isn't a great energy policy.
And not great, just in the context of all these recent announcements vis-a-vis defence spending, I'm just thinking, the government's saying this is going to be fantastic for growth, but surely these businesses that are involved in defence and everything need cheap energy. This money isn't going to go as far, is it, as if we had low energy costs?
Well, this government, even this government, has realised that it's made a complete mess of the budget and the employment taxes that are coming around the corner. So it is talking growth. It's having to talk growth, because if you want to spend, you need good tax-generating industries to create the tax to pay for all the things that we want. And defence is likely to be something that we're going to need a lot more of. Obviously, we could spend less, and I think we could have the argument about DWP spending. But, just put that aside. If you want growth, you need cheap energy. They go hand in hand. China's economy is growing year on year and has done for decades on the back of very cheap energy. It creates a new coal-powered power station every week. Its energy costs are about a tenth of what is faced by UK industry. So our UK industry will simply close and that production will move offshore. So the fundamental is cheap energy. We've got that in our hands to do so, and I would recommend that this government takes that as an option. Now, the other big growth thing, we've heard the Prime Minister stand on his back legs saying about he wants the UK to be the forerunner globally of the new AI industry. AI requires massively energy-hungry computer racks and systems. And I'll tell him the absolute truth, there will not be any massive data centres built in the UK to support AI, all the while we have the highest energy prices in the world.
Yeah, that's the fundamental
I'm afraid that is a fact.
That's the fundamental behind all of this. Thank you so much for coming on. Lord Craig McKinley there, talking about how net zero is like sepsis.
Well, we have some breaking news to bring you now. A car has driven into a crowd of people in the western German city of Mannheim. The Mannheimer Morgen newspaper has reported, citing witnesses.
Yes, local police say a police operation was underway in the city centre without giving further details. We'll have more details as and when we get them. That is, a car has ploughed into a crowd of people in the western German city of Mannheim.
Well, much more on that story and so much more after your very latest news headlines.
Your headlines at 12:33. Sir Keir Starmer is expected to return to the Commons today for the first time since his high-stakes diplomatic action across the Atlantic and in London. The Prime Minister told European leaders we are at a crossroads in history. At an emergency summit in London last night, European nations met with the aim to secure lasting peace in Ukraine.
The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting.
Sir Keir Starmer announced a 4-point plan to work with Ukraine to end the war and defend the country from Russia. The UK, France and other countries will step up their efforts in a coalition of the willing and seek to involve the US in their support for Ukraine. Meanwhile, in a royal show of solidarity, Zelensky received a warm welcome at Sandringham as he met the King yesterday. Meanwhile, Ukraine's president stressed his gratitude to the US and praised European unity after the intense 3 days of diplomacy. It comes after a fiery exchange between the Ukrainian leader and US President Donald Trump. Volodymyr Zelensky has said he is still ready to sign a US-Ukraine minerals deal after leaving the White House without it being agreed. Elsewhere, the King has met with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at Sandringham House. The private audience this morning came just a day after Charles welcomed Ukrainian President Zelensky to his Norfolk estate. Charles was pictured shaking hands with the Canadian leader, with Mr Trudeau warmly clasping the King's hand with both of his. In other news, a police investigation has been launched after a member of the public discovered human remains in Stoke-on-Trent. Police were called to reports of the skeletal discovery on land near Festival Park early on Sunday afternoon. The area is cordoned off as police examine the scene. Now, to that breaking news, a car has driven into a crowd of people in the western German city of Mannheim. That's according to the Mannheimer Morgen newspaper. It's citing eyewitnesses. Local police said a police operation was underway in the city centre without giving further details. The incident occurred as crowds gathered in cities across the regions, including Germany's Rhineland, for parades to mark the carnival season. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel. Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Buses replaced trains between Bishop Auckland and Darlington, where overnight engineering works have overrun. The M62 in Greater Manchester's closed westbound at junction 19 at Hayward after an accident. Queues back beyond junction 22 at Rishworth Moor, with delays too on routes through Rochdale and Oldham as you divert. Train services are suspended between Hereford and Ledbury after a vehicle hit a bridge. The M11 in Cambridgeshire is closed in both directions at junction 11. The A10 south of Cambridge after an accident. There are queues in both directions from junction 14 north of Cambridge and from junction 10 at Duxford. On the M1 in Bedfordshire, there's a lane closed northbound where someone's broken down between junctions 11 and 11A near Dunstable, causing delays. And on the M25 in Hertfordshire, 2 out of 4 lanes are closed anti-clockwise where a lorry is broken down between junctions 20 and 19 from Kings Langley to Watford. Queues from junction 21 for the M1.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 12:40 now, and some breaking news coming into us from Germany. A car has driven into a crowd of people in the western German city of Mannheim.
Well, local police said a police investigation is underway. The operation currently ongoing in the city centre, but no further details have been given.
Now, as we understand, the incident occurred as crowds gathered in cities across regions, including Germany's Rhineland, for parades to mark the carnival season.
Well, we're going to get more on this now with our national reporter, Charlie Peters, because, Charlie, it seems like we're having more and more of these. I think it's too early to call it an attack, but that's what it has all the hallmarks of.
At this stage, we've seen local media referring to it as a car ramming incident. But it's clear that the city centre in Mannheim in southwest Germany has been evacuated by emergency services. Plenty of footage that we've seen and have been able to verify at GB News of ambulances at the city centre attending to a very severe scene. And local media in Mannheim are reporting that at least one person has died, and that's been shared by national media outlets in Germany as well. The police have called on residents to avoid the area due to a large-scale operation at the central Paradeplatz city centre square in Mannheim, as we're saying, 2 weeks after that attack in Munich, which also claimed casualties from an Afghan asylum seeker. But at this incident, we don't know anything about the possible assailants or indeed just one assailant involved or suspect. But some local media outlets are suggesting that a black SUV drove at high speed into a crowd of people, We've also seen some footage that we're working to verify of police chasing a man, a video shared online of police chasing an individual after the incident. It's been reported, of course, that a vehicle rammed pedestrians in Mannheim. We have seen emergency responders on the scene, including both ambulances and police officers, some of them armed. And there is also a witness report from local media, the news site Mannheim Morgen. They're reporting that a car drove from the water tower near the city centre to the parade ground and hit people. That's according to an eyewitness at the scene.
So we understand that people were out and about for this parade or on their way to this parade for the carnival season. I mean, for this to happen so soon after that hideous car attack in Munich, hugely distressing for the German public.
Yeah, it's a diabolical situation for the German public. And as Tom was mentioning in the introduction to the story, this is such a common occurrence now. And we should also remember that in Mannheim, there was a terror attack there last May when an Islamist Afghan asylum seeker stabbed 6 people and killing a police officer with a stab to the neck as a police officer came in to actually detain one of the people who was being attacked in an attempt to calm the situation. He was then killed, murdered, as he attempted to take control of that situation. So Mannheim, it seems now, enduring another major security situation. As you said, Tom, too early to confirm whether or not this is a terror attack, but it does have all the typical warnings and indicators of previous incidents and terror attacks that have taken place in Germany in recent years.
Now, of course, the police operation is underway as we speak, and they haven't come out with further official information. But are there any hints about the perpetrator behind this? You mentioned there was some footage that we've not been able to verify at this stage of a man being chased. Do we think it's a sole perpetrator, and do we know anything about him?
We have no further information on who could be involved, but it does seem that the footage, again, we have to stress we can't verify at this stage, but they do come from compelling sources, which we have been able to use in the past, do show an indication of them chasing one person, but there's no further discussion there. In the attack in Munich a couple of weeks ago, there was some discussion that the Afghan asylum seeker in that case was joined by somebody in the passenger seat, but that was later removed from discussions. That was no longer confirmed to be a legitimate line of inquiry for the police. But it has been reported by Mannheim 24, another local outlet, that the vehicle was a black SUV, which again would bring in further information and indication towards this being a targeted attack due to the vehicle being used. There was some confusion. In fact, we shared that confusion a couple of weeks ago in Munich, that the vehicle being used was a Mini Cooper, not a typical weapon of choice for a car ramming attack. A black SUV, however, would add to concerns that this is a deliberate and targeted attack.
Yeah, the German press seem to be saying that it's unclear at this time whether it is an accident or an attack. But we've seen previously how Christmas markets have been a target. We've seen other sort of traditional get-togethers be targeted in city centres or town centres, village centres. And this is the start of some kind of German carnival season.
That's right.
So another tradition.
Yes, in the city centre, people gathering, and some of the footage that we've seen immediately of the reaction after the incident, people running away in complete panic, very busy crowds in Mannheim, that city in southwest Germany, reacting, as you'd imagine, with terror and shock at what has clearly occurred in the city centre. The police attempting to secure the scene. And in the footage that we have been able to verify and check against other sources of emergency services attending in the city centre in the immediate aftermath, they are forming cordons around people on the ground receiving urgent medical treatment. I've seen footage of a police officer taking off a jacket to create a visual block away from people walking past who may be attempting to film or observe the incident. So a very basic and rushed and immediate response from German emergency services as we had reports of a black SUV being driven into crowds of people at the Paradeplatz in central Mannheim.
And to repeat, we know, or at least there have been official reports of one death, at least one death involved in this incident. but we don't know anything else about how many other people may have been affected, or indeed if there is more than one death.
We've seen reports that several people were injured, but we have local media reporting one dead at this stage. Police have said that due to their deployments, an extensive deployment, citizens have been asked to avoid the city centre and take a detour. But video on social media, which we've seen, appears to show people attempting to obscure the view of one person injured on the floor, a police officer taking off their coat to prevent vision. It's unclear from footage we've seen so far just how many people have been caught up in this vehicle being driven into a crowd. But local outlet Mannheim 24 has suggested that a black SUV drove at high speed into a crowd of people. We've also seen one individual appearing to receive CPR treatment from the emergency services at the ground, and we have seen footage of multiple people lying in the street. But again, we can't confirm the number of injuries just at this time, that one person has been killed, according to local and national media in Germany. Several people attempting to support and help those injured on the ground. And also another very distressing element of this story. It appears that the police are chasing a man in some footage shared that we haven't been able to verify yet. We are pursuing inquiries on those reports at this stage.
Now, of course, this is all in the run-up to Carnival in Germany, which is sort of a series of parades and street parties, festivities that are all in the run-up to Ash Wednesday. It's a Christian celebration that has been going on for years and years and years in Germany. A potential symbolic moment there, a bit like these Christmas markets that have been attacked in the past. Something else worth noting, although we don't know anything about the perpetrator so far, is that we are on the third day of Ramadan. And traditionally, at least in recent years, we have seen a spike in terror incidents during this holy month, the month of Ramadan. Looking at this instance here, it's almost as if we've found the intersection of a Christian festival and a Muslim time of solemnity and fasting. I wonder if that has any relevance at all, although, as I say, again, we don't yet know who the perpetrator is.
Well, Tom, it is too early to say for sure, but we do know that it is a consistent tactic and method of lone actor Islamist assailants and terrorists, that they will drive vehicles into crowds of people, particularly around Carnival season. It should also be noted, very important, I think, that police are on especially high alert for this year's Carnival parades after social media accounts directly linked to the Islamic State terrorist organisation called for attacks on events in Cologne and Nuremberg. So Mannheim not specifically named in those threats to those events, but we do know that the police were reacting to social media footage calling on attacks to take place from the Islamic State terrorist organisation. It may have lost its territory in Iraq and Syria, and maybe a significantly weakened version of the rampaging and the appalling terror that they inflicted on the continent really from a decade ago now, from 2015 onwards. But the group, its terror cells, still operate on the continent. We have seen a surge in Islamist activity, particularly in Germany, in recent years. Mannheim itself is still reeling from that stabbing incident from an Afghan asylum seeker last May, stabbing several people, one of them a police officer who was killed. And also, Tom and Emily, let's not forget, of course, the deadly car rammings in Magdeburg in December and Munich last month, as well as that stabbing in Mannheim I just mentioned. So lots and lots of fear and focus from the German authorities and indeed the population, who have to have an additional level of focus and concern when they go about their business these days.
Absolutely. And that change in how people go about their lives, worrying about whether they should go to that Christmas market, whether they should turn up for that particular carnival parade, just a hesitance about being in large crowds of people is something that I'm sure a lot of Europeans feel, particularly in Germany, as of the last few times we've had incidents similar to this. Of course, at the moment, we only know that a car has been driven into a crowd of people in reports that at least one person has died, although some German media are saying it may be that they are just severely hurt, severely injured, depending on which outlet you're looking at. But we're getting more information as it comes. A black SUV is what's being reported as the vehicle. I imagine we'll get some response from German politicians very soon, as well as we learn more. But a shocking day for Germany once again.
Yeah, a shocking day, and more details coming through. A black SUV driving at high speed, though. It is important to stress that that is a typical example of an Islamist car ramming attack. There have been so many incidents using that specific tactic. All the warnings and indicators here at this stage are of a terrorist incident. Again, we haven't had a clarification or confirmation on who the perpetrator is, and I'm not concluding that that is what it is at this stage, but all of the indicators and the evidence at this stage points towards it being a continuation of so many other incidents that Germany has endured, particularly in light of the fact that the police were on high alert as a consequence of social media threats from accounts linked to the Islamic State organisation. They were pointing at Cologne and Nuremberg, but Mannheim, of course, has endured similar incidents in recent years, that mass stabbing attack in May, and Germany, with great sadness, has endured a run of car ramming incidents in the last 3 months. Cars being driven deliberately into crowds of people at a festival, a Christmas market in Magdeburg, also just on the eve of the Munich Security Conference in Munich last month. So they are reeling from those incidents still, while also now reacting very severely what's happening now. Again, what do we know about this situation at the moment? Specifically, it's been reported that one person has died, several injured, although more eyewitness accounts that I'm seeing even in the last few moments appear to point to several people immobilised on the floor receiving care. One person definitely receiving CPR footage that we have checked against other sources, and also footage we've seen of police officers and emergency services taking off their jackets and coats, trying to cordon off and block eyewitnesses from seeing specific care taking place, which of course is a very, very sensitive moment and is out of respect for those receiving treatment. But a very drastic and appalling situation in Mannheim at the moment.
Certainly. Well, Charlie Peters, thanks so much for being across this for us. Of course, much more as we learn more on this breaking and developing story here on Good Afternoon Britain. But do stay with us, much more to cover indeed. Next hour, we'll be back in Parliament and looking at Ukraine as well as more on this breaking news.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A fine day for many out there today. Beautifully sunny again across much of the south. More cloud further north, and a few spots of drizzly rain on this weather front, pushing up against this area of high pressure. That's what's bringing the sunny skies across the south. Where this weather front is lying, it is producing quite a lot of thicker cloud over parts of northern England, north coast of Wales, Northern Ireland. A little bit of drizzly rain here and there, chiefly over the Lake District. Some showers across the Northern Isles of Scotland, but much of Scotland dry. Some brightness to the east of Scotland, some sunshine here. Plenty of sunshine across the south. Temperatures touch above average, getting up to 10, 11 degrees pretty widely. Some places could see temperatures climb into the teens, but with the clear skies tonight, it will turn cold across the south once more. We'll keep quite a bit of cloud across northern areas. Still a few showers just moving into Shetland. Quite breezy across the north. The winds will strengthen further through the night. Thicker clouds with that weather front we saw earlier just across the Lake District, Northern Ireland. A little bit of drizzly rain is possible here. Much of England and Wales, though, staying dry. With these clear skies in the south, temperatures are going to fall away fairly sharply, and like last night, we could well see some fog patches just thickening up through the night. It could be quite dense by morning time. We'll continue with the thicker cloud over northwest England, as much as Scotland, and here maybe a little bit of showery rain trickling in, but it will be a much milder night across the north compared to the south. Temperatures in towns and cities down below freezing. Rural spots like last night could be down to -5, -6, maybe -7. And there could be some fog around as well, which could linger through much of the morning tomorrow across the south, but it will be pretty patchy in nature. Another generally sunny day here. Maybe a brighter day for Cumbria, but rain will come into northwest Scotland and getting windy across Scotland through tomorrow. Some gusty conditions, but again, for most, double figures.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could be one of 2 big winners in our latest giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Apparently in 1991, I took out an insurance on my computer, which I have no recollection of at all. But recently, I've had a foreign voice ring me and say, unless I pay the £1,000 immediately, they'll take it out of my bank account.
They wouldn't have access to your bank account.
No, they have no access to my bank account. And what you should do, to begin with, you feel frightened. And you think, my God, £1,000 coming up, what do I do? And then Neil, my partner, said, just ignore it. And that's what you've got to do. But they are persistent.
So threatening as well.
And we changed we changed the number and everything. And still, they managed to get through to you. And we told the bank not to accept any £1,000 checks, something like that. But it is awful. But I say to your viewers and listeners, please, please ignore these phone calls.
Yes.
Even if at the end of the day it's true and they do come and collect £1,000 legally, don't do anything about it. Just ignore it.
Yeah. I think there's an organisation you can phone which is anti-scammer.
Is there?
They can do a lot of this stuff for you. I'm no help to you because I don't know what it is.
Well, I might look into that because it is worrying, you know, to begin with, and then they are so persistent.
Yeah.
That is the thing.
My mum had a similar thing the other day, and this is a good tip to remember. And her bank rang her up and said it was her bank, and they needed to get into her account immediately because someone had hacked her account and they were taking her money out. So it's automatically the panic.
Yeah.
You're losing money. Yeah. And they said, just share the one-time password that's about to come to your phone. And at that point, she went, no, you should never share your one-time password.
No.
If anybody asks you to do that, it's a scam.
No, exactly.
Yeah. So just a good one to remember.
Yeah, yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Monday, the 3rd of March. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, a German police operation is ongoing in Western Germany after a dangerous incident reportedly left several people on the ground after a car was driven into a crowd of people. We'll bring you the latest as we get it.
And here at home, Keir Starmer seeks a coalition of the willing as he offers his plan for peace in Ukraine. But are you willing to cough up yet more money on this war? The Prime Minister will deliver his assessment on a turbulent weekend to the Commons this afternoon.
Yes, and this all comes as calls grow for Donald Trump's UK state visit to be cancelled following that very public spat with President Zelensky. Is the president's stance on Ukraine enough to really damage the special relationship, or should it go ahead? We'll have the latest from Downing Street.
Elsewhere, we're discussing how the government plans to revolutionise home ownership in England and Wales by banning new leasehold flats, making common hold the default tenure. But just what will it mean for those trying to get on the housing ladder and, frankly, those already in leasehold flats?
Well, yes, we'll bring you more on that breaking news from Mannheim in Western Germany. A car driving into a crowd of people. Again, it was only last month that the same thing or similar happened in Munich. We don't yet know what the perpetrator was, whether it was an attack or an accident as it stands, but we'll bring you more as you get it. But yes, the focus this afternoon will be on Keir Starmer, taking to the House of Commons stage to bring us his latest.
Absolutely, and I think there are many questions to ask about what actually was achieved at the Lancaster House Emergency Summit with 19 different leaders from European countries, but Canada too, and of course the head of NATO as well. So much discussion, but what are the concrete things that have actually been achieved, other than, of course, this further £2.2 billion in aid, a loan to Ukraine, and missiles that will be manufactured in Northern Ireland to be given as well.
Yes, and what does it mean? What does it mean for us? What does it mean for us? What do you make of the £1.6 billion that will be going to Ukraine? That was pledged by Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer over the weekend, and also British troops being used in the event of a peace deal. What exactly does that mean? How long will they be there? Is there an exit strategy? What if Russia decided to launch an attack on those particular troops? Would we fight back? Would we then be involved in an all-out war? Many questions.
Huge questions, and frankly, the Prime Minister will have to be put through his paces. I think we're going to hear a lot about Donald Trump and this state visit as well when he gets to the Commons, but, of course, much more to discuss on the show as well, keeping you up to date with goings-on in Germany. Big developments after that incident with a car ramming into people. We'll get more on that after your headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Tom, Emily, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 1 o'clock. These are your headlines. To that breaking news now, one person is reportedly dead after a car drove into a crowd of people in the western German city of Mannheim. That's according to multiple local media reports. German police said a police operation is ongoing in the city centre after a dangerous incident. The incident occurred as crowds gathered in the cities across the regions, including in Germany's Rhineland, for parades to mark the carnival season. It's understood several people are severely injured after a black SUV drove at high speed into people travelling from the centrally located Paradeplatz Square towards the city's landmark water tower, and several people are understood to be injured. Sir Keir Starmer is expected to return to the Commons today for the first time since his high-stakes diplomatic action across the Atlantic and in London. The Prime Minister told European leaders we are at a crossroads in history. At an emergency summit in London last night, European nations met with the aim to secure lasting peace in Ukraine.
The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting.
Sir Keir Starmer announced a 4-point plan to work with Ukraine to end the war and defend the country from Russia. The UK, France and other countries will step up their efforts in a coalition of the willing and seek to involve the US in their support for Ukraine. Meanwhile, in a royal show of solidarity, Zelensky received a warm welcome at Sandringham as he met the King last night. Meanwhile, Ukraine's president stressed his gratitude to the US and praised European unity after the intense 3 days of diplomacy. It comes after a fiery exchange between the Ukrainian leader and the US President Donald Trump. Volodymyr Zelensky has said he is still ready to sign a US-Ukraine minerals deal after leaving the White House without it being agreed. And Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for the Armed Forces, Luke Pollard, told GB News the UK must act as a bridge between the US and Europe.
Really important that we stand with our allies. The US is our most important security partner. I see it every day as a defence minister, but it's also right that at these difficult times, that the UK acts as that bridge between the USA and our friends in Europe to bring together the plan for a lasting and durable peace in Ukraine, because all of us, President Trump, the UK Prime Minister, President Zelensky, want to see a peace that lasts, a deal that can be stuck to, so the Ukrainian people can know that they will never be invaded by Russia again.
Meanwhile, Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs, Wendy Morton, called for more clarity from the Prime Minister.
It's about very much the UK building on the work, the role that we've had in terms of Ukraine, the start of the war, and even before that, very much as a close ally of Ukraine, but also as a really strong ally of the US as well. And this is about finding a way forward. But equally, I think it's also important that, you know, for shadow ministers like myself, for Her Majesty's opposition, we need a little bit more detail and a little bit more clarity about what was agreed at the summit, and so we're hoping that we will see that this afternoon when the Prime Minister comes to the House of Commons.
Elsewhere, the King has met with the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at Sandringham House. The private audience this morning came just a day after King Charles welcomed Ukrainian President Zelensky. Charles was pictured shaking hands with the Canadian leader, Mr. Trudeau, warmly clasping the King's hand with both of his. In other news, a police investigation has been launched after a member of the public discovered human remains in Stoke-on-Trent. Police were called to reports of the skeletal discovery on land near Festival Park early on Sunday afternoon. The area is cordoned off as police examine the scene. And commuters will be feeling the pinch today as train fares rise again. Fares in England and Wales have increased by around 4.6%, along with higher railcard prices, despite record low service reliability. Recent analysis by the PA News Agency, based on data from the rail regulator, found that reliability on Britain's railways has hit a record low, with more than 1 in 25 services cancelled in the year to February the 1st. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 1. And of course, throughout the show today, we're keeping you up to date as a German police operation is ongoing in Western Germany after a dangerous incident that reportedly left, well, several dozen people on the ground after a car drove into a crowd of people.
Yes, we'll bring you the very latest. German media outlets are reporting that at least one person has died and many others injured. This is in Mannheim in Western Germany. We'll keep you up to date. But before that, let's cross live to Downing Street because there's a lot going on when it comes to politics. We're joined by our political editor, Christopher Hope, who's straight out of lobby. Keir Starmer due to address the House of Commons, other MPs, opposition MPs a little bit later about what he's doing with all this that's going on with Ukraine. What do we know now, Christopher?
And that's right, Emily. The PM is addressing MPs at 3:30, and it's quite an update. Normally, these are kind of regular events where you basically brief MPs on the PM's travels overseas. Well, he's had quite a few days of it, hasn't he? 5 days of international diplomacy, not least in the Oval Office, and watching what happened, that spectacle of the attacks on Zelensky by both Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, his deputy, in the Oval Office, and almost the row they had. And then, of course, this summit yesterday in Lancaster House. So that'll be live on GB News at 3:30. From the briefing with the PM spokesman just now, we're hearing that John Healey, the Defence Secretary, will fly to America this week for a meeting with Pete Hegseth. He is the US DOD, the Defence Secretary. Perhaps in his briefcase there might be an offer of what next. Now, what next? There are options on the table. One of them the government has now confirmed is that there's an option, a suggestion of a 30-day truce. It's been briefed by President Macron to French newspapers overnight, a truce of sea and air to try and encourage some form of space for a peace deal to be struck. We still don't know what the shape of any kind of US security is. They won't say if that's radar, if that's fighter jets to protect UK and other countries' boots on the ground. And also they won't say when that might be. That depends on the progress of any peace talks. The UK has spent so far in the past 3 years £12.8 billion in grants and loans on the Ukraine war. We asked them, have we got anything back for that? Of course, Trump is asking for access to rare minerals. We're told by the government that the Ukraine security is UK's security. Defending Ukraine is absolutely critical to the UK national security. So we're not seeking any access to rare materials, rare earths, in the same way that the President Donald Trump is. It's simply we are committing ourselves to Ukraine for the security of our continent. And there's a planned European Council meeting on Thursday this week. No word yet on whether the UK will go to that. It could well be that Keir Starmer goes to that as things planned. No word, but this is a fluid situation, and we're waiting to see what's next from the government.
Absolutely hugely significant moment this very afternoon and later on in the week too. But of course, a point of contention is this state visit proposed to Donald Trump, a unique event, a second state visit from a president. Never happened before in the history of our two countries' relationship. And yet it's becoming more and more controversial due to the, frankly, outburst we saw in the Oval Office on Friday.
That's right, Tom. Now, I was there in the Oval Office when the Prime Minister produced rather theatrically that letter from the King to President Trump, offering him two things, both a visit to Balmoral, looks like this year, frankly, and then a state visit, we think, or they're not confirmed, for next year. Now, over the weekend, there's been noises off from opposition politicians saying this offer should be withdrawn. There's no question Donald Trump was delighted to receive it. It's unprecedented to get a second state visit for a president. It's unique because, of course, he's returned to the White House after a 4-year gap, Donald Trump. Yesterday, Keir Starmer said he's not interested in Twitter. Good for them for tweeting about it. He said he's not going to be diverted by the SNP, one of the parties calling for this state visit to be abandoned. Now, today in the lobby briefing, that there's no change on that, and I can't imagine that will change at all. I think we can expect outbursts that will offend sensibilities in the UK from Donald Trump on a pretty regular basis. He says things which we find difficult to understand and do offend some people. Other people, of course, support what he says, and that's fine. But to withdraw such a public offer from the King to the President would cause a real rift in diplomatic relations, and that's not going to happen. We need the US working with the UK to try and help to bring us peace to Ukraine, and that would make it even worse to withdraw the invitation now.
There seems to be quite a political consensus that supporting Ukraine with military aid and the like is very important. But do you think there will be some pushback on this $1.6 billion? Do you think there might be any pushback on what Starmer has so far agreed, or do you think there'll be a sort of a general agreement that he's on the right tracks?
I'm detecting mutterings on social media about why we're giving Ukraine all this money for their armed forces. Should we be boosting our forces here? I think there was a bit of an education to be given by the government. It hasn't happened yet about why is it that Donald Trump's asking for access to valuable rare minerals for their tech industry. We're asking for nothing in the UK. We're simply doing it because we're good neighbours and it's the right thing to do. That conversation, I think, as we go into a very difficult summer this year with spending cuts about what we're spending on Ukraine and what's in it for us. I mean, I understand the government's position, which is we're doing it as a good neighbour for the security of the continent of Europe, and as the PM said yesterday in that Lancaster House press conference, problems in Europe will wash up on our shore pretty quickly. That needs to be explained in better terms, I think, for the public to understand that that's why we're investing heavily in Ukraine for no obvious return on that investment.
Hopefully there'll be some questions about British troops and what exactly they'll be doing. Christopher Hope, thank you very much indeed. We'll come back to you, I'm sure, later in the show, but for now.
Yes, let's go back to that breaking news coming to us from Germany. An update for you. A German police spokesperson has confirmed that a car drove into a crowd in Mannheim and that one person has died as a result of that collision. They've also confirmed several people have been seriously injured.
OK, well, joining us now is the German writer Elisabeth Dampier, who is in Germany. Elisabeth, another shocking incident in Germany, this time in Mannheim, so soon after the incident in Munich.
Well, yes, and it's also a repeat incident. Last year, on the 31st of May, there was another attack. You know, we don't know if it's an Afghan asylum seeker or what it is or who the person is, but last year there was an attack and a police officer was killed, and an anti-Islam activist was almost stabbed to death. And so the city is not new to this sort of, you know, attack.
This is going to be so difficult to process for so many German people. It seems that, well, it's only a few weeks since this previous attack. We've seen, I don't know, how many cities in Germany now have had Christmas markets, celebrations, festivities, or even a group of trade unionists as well, having cars ploughed into them. It seems like it is a repeated pattern, and one that is not slowing down. If anything, it seems to be ramping up.
So, yes, I mean, you know, it now feels like there's a pattern, and it also feels a very bad taste of our government, not only 2 days after the election, to fly in more potential dangers into our country from Afghanistan and from other countries, just 2 days after the election and days after the attacks in Munich. And you just don't know what to say to this anymore. You feel like the government is not taking the threat seriously.
Yeah, and of course we saw the massive boost for the Alternative for Deutschland just at the recent election. So clearly there are a lot of German people who voted for right-wing parties, and probably very much a big issue was immigration. But just about this particular incident, of course we don't know who the perpetrator is. It is, the German press are reporting that someone has been arrested, I understand. So that would indicate that perhaps they believe this is an attack. We're told that there's some kind of carnival season going on at the moment. That's why there were large crowds of people in the centre. Can you tell us about that?
Well, they're all over southern Germany, especially. There's a lot of carnival processions. Today is Rosenmontag, and it's usually a busy day. But from the images, that was not a procession of people, you know, dressed up. But you know, there was just people in the city centre of Mannheim, probably going shopping or going on about their daily lives. That was not a carnival procession. But many carnival processions have been cancelled due to security reasons. So you can see how, you know, this is affecting our everyday lives already.
Yeah, and Elisabeth, what's Mannheim like? Have you visited Mannheim? What's it like as a city?
I think actually Mannheim is quite a nice city. It was obviously heavily bombed in World War II, and the architecture is obviously very, you know, modern in a way that many other cities are. But it's actually perfectly lovely and has a nice, you know, inner city where you can do lots of shopping, and it's actually really a nice city.
So it's usually considered quite a peaceful area of the country.
Yeah, definitely.
No, it is just fascinating to see this repeated, well, this pattern that we're seeing. But what are you reading in the German press about how much more we know? There is, of course, a huge amount of speculation, and we do need to be careful in the early minutes and hours after the incident took place. We, of course, will know more from official sources throughout the course of the afternoon. But what is the general sense of feeling from the German media right now?
Well, they're obviously, you know, they're split in two, because some parts of the German media are obviously saying, you know, we don't know anything about it yet, and there is a tendency in German media to play these things down anyway. But you know, there are other outlets that will literally say, you know, this has been happening now frequently, and there are serious issues, and there, you know, we saw it was a black SUV, and why is it driving into a crowd of people again? This was not a car accident. It seemed deliberate. Yeah, it's just a very, very, you know, depressing feeling, really, that you know, the sense of security is definitely eroding.
Yeah, well, we found out quite swiftly after the incident in Munich about the perpetrator and all of that. So I imagine we will with this one too. Elisabeth Dampier, thank you very much indeed. German writer, and you are in Germany.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Plenty more to come on the show today. We're talking government plans to revolutionise home ownership, their words, in England and Wales, banning the sale of new leasehold flats, making common hold the default tenure. But what does this mean for you and me? That next.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation. You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 23 minutes past 1. Now, could we be seeing the end of new leasehold properties in the UK? It's a reform that's been promised by politicians over the course of the last 30 years, but none has done it. Campaigners have been up in arms, with some people trapped in homes with the service charges rising and rising year on year, unable to sell the flats they thought they bought. But it's a hugely controversial topic, because would leasehold reform strip away property rights from those who are the freeholders? Well, joining us to discuss this all is property expert Russell Quirk. And Russell, why has this reform been quite so controversial over the course of the last 30 years?
Yes, good afternoon. Well, the problem with this is that the introduction of common hold rather than leasehold doesn't actually fix the problem that the government says exists. Now, it's definitely true to say that there are serious issues with regard to management companies by way of maintenance, buildings insurance and so on, that levy charges on leasehold flat owners that are high, that are inappropriate. But just changing the tenure of a block of flats in the future, and bearing in mind this is only on properties going forward, this is not going to affect the millions and millions of leasehold flats and some houses that are already leasehold. So this will not be retrospective. It will just be on properties that would otherwise be leasehold as new builds that will now be common hold. The problem is that where the government says that the issue here is one of kind of out of control management and maintenance costs. Well, if you live in a block of 30, 40, 50 or 100 flats, even if you are now common hold rather than leasehold, you still have to have a management company that's going to look after things like the communal areas, changing light bulbs in corridors, cutting the grass on communal areas, looking after the car park, paying for the buildings insurance and so on. So I'm afraid, and I hate to kind of bash the government, as I know I'm inclined to do, but this is a fix that doesn't fix the problem that the government purports to fix. The one problem, though, that it will fix, and this hasn't been mentioned, it seems, in the government press release or indeed in media today, is the problem of leaseholders as their leases get shorter being held to ransom by rogue freeholders. Now, this will fix that problem. And in effect, that is, if you own a flat that started off with a lease of 99 years and now you've only got 70 years left because obviously the property is now 30 years old, you can end up in a situation where freeholders that are completely and utterly are not regulated to actually have to use a formula or a formal approach to the cost of that new lease. You can end up in a position that you as a flat owner, as a leaseholder, are told that you've got to pay 20, 30, 40, 50,000 pounds, whatever it might be, to actually renew and extend your lease. So this issue today, this announcement by government, will fix that. But it doesn't fix the problem of rogue maintenance and management companies charging too much for decorating, maintenance, grass cutting, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, this seems to be an issue that for people who've been badly affected by having a leasehold in one way or another, get people very mobilised about this particular issue. But people do know what they're signing up to in a way, don't they? When you buy a leasehold property, you are given the amount of years that are left on that. You are given sort of information about whether there's a service fee or, you know, what you might have to pay for in the future. Is the issue that there's not enough transparency as well, maybe? I don't know. Russell?
I think probably the issue is one that you can't expect a leasehold flat purchaser to know what might happen 20 or 30 years down the line in terms of the implications of a lease running out. But I just make another point. What's interesting in the press release from government today is, I mean, they talk about revolutionising property ownership by way of this announcement. It will not do that. So that's a huge over-egging of what this does. The other interesting thing, I think, for the politicos amongst us is that the government have also used the word in their headline, feudal, that this will eradicate the feudal nature of property nature. Now, I can't help myself, Emily and Tom, but to read some politics into that this is an ideological thing by way of it eradicating what they see as something feudal by way of, I guess, look, you could say it's a bit of property Marxism kicking in, couldn't you?
It's strange, given that they're, maintaining the feudal system across a vast array of housing in this country. If they really think it's feudal, you'd think that they'd retrospectively change the leasehold agreements that have already been introduced, rather than new ones coming on stream. But Russell Quirk, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thanks indeed for joining us, property expert, of course.
Do they want us all to communally own everything?
No, I don't think so.
The ideological pursuit against the feudal system.
Well, I think if you're against a feudal system, you're in favour of private ownership.
Yeah, yes, that's true. That's true. Right, well, that was Russell Quirk, our property expert, but it is actually the final week to see how you could win one of the 2 amazing prize bundles in our latest giveaway. So each one, to remind you, has a brand new iPhone 16, £500 in shopping vouchers and a whopping £10,000 in tax-free cash. I've only got an iPhone 15. So anyway, hurry, lines close on Friday.
It's the final week to see how you could be one of 2 big winners in our latest giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's programme. Lord Wolney, the former extremism advisor to the government, says that Islamist terrorism is the greatest threat this country faces. He's blasting the new crime and policing bill.
Yeah, he's also talking about how this new Islamophobia definition could be blasphemy by the back door.
Well, that's coming up. Joining us in the studio after the headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Your headlines at 1:31. One person has died and several are injured after a car drove into a crowd of people in the German city of Mannheim. A police spokesperson has now confirmed that, adding that one suspect has been arrested. The official said it was unclear whether any suspects were involved. The police is appealing to the public to stay at home. The incident occurred as crowds gathered in the cities across the regions, including Germany's Rhineland, for parades to mark the carnival season. It's understood several people are severely injured after a black SUV drove at high speed into people travelling from the centrally located Paradeplatz towards the city's landmark water tower. Sir Keir Starmer is expected to return to the Commons today for the first time since his diplomatic action across the Atlantic and in London. The Prime Minister told European leaders we are at a crossroads in history. At an emergency summit in London last night, European nations met with the aim to secure lasting peace in Ukraine.
The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air, together with others. Europe must do the heavy lifting.
Sir Keir Starmer announced a 4-point plan to work with Ukraine to end the war and defend the country from Russia. The UK, France and other countries will step up their efforts in a coalition of the willing and seek to involve the US in their support for Ukraine. Meanwhile, in a royal show of solidarity, Zelensky received a warm welcome at Sandringham as he met the King last night. Ukraine's president stressed his gratitude to the US and praised European unity after the intense 3 days of diplomacy. It comes just days after a fiery exchange between the Ukrainian leader and US President Donald Trump. Volodymyr Zelensky has said he is still ready to sign a US-Ukraine minerals deal after leaving the White House without it being agreed. Elsewhere, the King has met with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at Sandringham House. The private audience this morning comes just days after Charles welcomed Ukrainian President Zelensky to his Norfolk estate. King Charles was pictured shaking hands with the Canadian leader, with Mr. Trudeau warmly clasping the King's hands with both of his. In other news now, a police investigation has been launched after a member of the public discovered human remains in Stoke-on-Trent. Police were called to reports of the skeletal discovery on land near to Festival Park on Sunday afternoon. The area is now cordoned off as police examine the scene. And renowned Scottish painter Jack Vetriano has died at the age of 73. That's according to his publicist. The artist was found dead at his apartment in Nice in the south of France on Saturday. It is understood there are no suspicious circumstances around his death. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. Orkney ferry sailings are suspended between Egglesay and Wyre because of high winds and tidal conditions. The A1M in County Durham is partly blocked southbound by an accident at junction 58 at Burtree, causing queues. Buses replaced trains between Bishop Auckland and Darlington because of overrunning engineering works. The M62 in Greater Manchester's closed westbound at junction 19 at Hayward after an accident. There are queues back beyond junction 22 at Rishworth Moor. In Staffordshire, the A50 is closed eastbound between the McDonald's roundabout and Water Bridge roundabout at Utoxeter after an accident with delays towards there. Train services are suspended between Hereford and Ledbury after a vehicle hit a bridge. The M11 in Cambridge is closed northbound at junction 11 for the A10 south of Cambridge after an accident with long delays in both directions. And the M25 in Essex, the clockwise exit at junction 28 for the A12 is closed because of a traffic light problem.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Sadly, on the 18th of December last year, I was 9:20 in the morning in London on Woolwich Manor Way, going about my business to deliver something to someone, and I heard a banging on my car door. The handle was being rattled, but I locked my door in London, Martin, and the next thing I knew was a fist with something metal just punched through the driver's window into my face and knocked me over to the passenger seat. I had a wonderful angel called Bobby, who was my witness, who saw it happen. We got to hospital in Essex. They couldn't deal with it because it was a bad injury, and I ended up in Moorfields Hospital on the 19th. My lovely wife was incredible, and I had an operation, and currently, as I sit opposite you, I have 6 stitches holding my eyeball together, and I've got at least 3 more operations to hopefully get my sight back.
Now, the astonishing thing about this is, it was just a random act from some nutter. It's changed your life forever. At the moment, you can't see. No. Your cornea is dislodged. You need to go undergo major eye surgery. But, Mike, a lot of people will be saying the obvious thing. Why has nobody been nicked? Well, now, I know Woolwich, right? You can't drive through Woolwich without getting a ticket for Ules, right? The geezer was in a van or a car?
He was in a dark van, and I unfortunately wasn't able to take a photograph of the reg plate.
There's got to be CCTV there.
There's got to be CCTV there, and all I can say is that I do feel let down because it's GBH, it's not just stealing a handbag, not that that's making, a small issue of that, that's bad enough, but being GBH, they dropped the case after 3 weeks.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 37 minutes past 1. Now, the former Labour MP says that, Lord Wolney says that Islamist terrorism is the greatest threat this country faces.
Yes, and former counter-extremism czar to the government. He believes the new crime and policing bill does not give the police and the Home Secretary sufficient powers to crack down on repeated mass demonstrations such as the Gaza protests, which have a potential to reach boiling point. And he's also expressed deep concern over the potential for Labour, the government, to adopt a definition of Islamophobia that could be seen as a blasphemy law by the back door.
Well, there is so much to get our teeth into here. So joining us in the studio is the former counter-extremism advisor, Lord Wolney. Thanks for joining us. Shall we start with this potential for an Islamophobia definition? Clearly, the government has its heart in the right place, but this could really end up being a speech law.
It could, and anti-Muslim hatred is absolutely real. Every time there is a spike of terrorist violence, or certainly in the aftermath of 7th of October, the attacks on Muslim people just going about their lives in Britain have risen exponentially. So it is absolutely right to try to tackle this, but because, of course, Islam is a faith, the risk is that you end up criminalising, effectively, criticism of Islam as a religion. And we've had blasphemy laws in this country to protect Christianity back in previous centuries. We must not go back there by people in a well-meaning way trying to protect Muslim people in Britain.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I have absolutely no confidence that Angela Rayner will come up with some definition or decide upon some definition that will fit. Because I say that because Labour did adopt a very vague definition previously when they weren't in government that talked about how it's racism against the perception of Muslimness, or it was so vague, a perception of Muslimness, or oh God, I can't remember. You'll remember the wording. But it was so vague that, as you say, it could lend itself to, well, potentially criminalising people for just having opinions.
But look, I'm taking this as a sign of optimism because, yes, Labour in opposition in the Corbyn years made, I think, a serious mistake in adopting the definition of Islamophobia, which had been generated by, again, well-meaning people as part of an all-party group on all sides.
I mean, the foreword was written by Dominic Grieve. This was written up jointly by Wes Streeting and Anna Soubry. I mean, these weren't Corbynites who came up with this definition.
No, they weren't. And
these were centrist politicians.
They weren't, and it was a mistake for the reason that that you set out, Emily, in that they were well-meaning people. I think there were people behind the scenes who helped draft that definition who I would not describe as well-meaning, and it effectively would have rendered Islamophobic the idea of talking about threats that of Islamists, which is a different thing to people who practice a Muslim faith, Islamists infiltrating communities, and it would have rendered the prevent definition, which has its problems in operation, but it would have rendered that Islamophobic to talk about. So the fact that there is a new process that has been kicked off by Angela Rayner, rather than the government simply adopting this definition and transposing it straight into government, that's a good thing.
OK, that is a good thing that they're working on it a little more, and that they might be moving away from that previous definition. Just to say what I was saying before, that I didn't get it out properly. Yes, the definition of Islamophobia, which Labour did adopt a few years ago, is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. Now, to me, that could bring a lot of censorship. For example, if a woman wanted to be, or anyone wanted to be critical of the wearing of the burqa, for example, that surely is something, a perceived Muslimness, because if you see someone wearing a burqa, you assume they are Muslim. And so are you allowed to be critical of that item of clothing?
You've got, I think, what is a really important test case, which is going through at the moment, where this is prior to any definition of Islamophobia being accepted by the government. You're having the police who are prosecuting people for burning the Quran. Now, to be clear, I think it is abhorrent to do that. It is deeply disrespectful. We shouldn't be burning any books. That has very troubling connotations, but it's the difference between disapproving of it very strongly and it being illegal. And so we have to be so careful to be able to protect Muslim people who do experience hatred without effectively introducing this blasphemy law by the back door.
Now, you started this conversation saying it's very important to crack down on anti-Muslim hate, and again in that answer you used anti-Muslim hatred as the word you use. Would the government do well to stop using the word Islamophobia, which of course refers to, well, a religion, a set of ideas, a book, and instead use anti-Muslim prejudice, which refers to people, human beings? Is there perhaps a very important semantic choice that has been made at the start of this process that actually means we're going to be talking about criticism of ideas rather than attacks on people?
Look, my clear preference would be to stick with the current way in which governments have framed this, which is anti-Muslim hatred. There is a range of views on it. I know a number of Muslims in positions of leadership who feel similarly. It may well be that the ship has sailed on that, and if that is the case, then you have to work that bit harder to explain what is off limits here and what still, must be accepted in a liberal democracy which prides itself on its freedom of speech.
Yeah, because the government seems to be using them interchangeably. The website page on the government website is saying Islamophobia / anti-Muslim hatred. I don't believe they're interchangeable words. surely that's number one sort of thing to find out, as Tom says.
And they're used so often in the same sort of sentence. They'll roll off the tongue saying, for example, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. But to me, anti-Semitism refers to hatred of a people.
Yeah,
it's racialised.
exactly.
It's talking about people. It's not criticising the Torah. No one believes if you say the Torah is a silly book or, you know, God didn't make the world in 7 days or anything like that. No one believes you're being anti-Semitic, because you're not. Whereas if you criticise things in the Quran, people could say that you're being anti-Semitic. Even if you take Islamophobic. Even if you're just taking a principled position on debating an issue. I mean, this is serious stuff.
I mean, let's not forget that there is a school teacher from Batley in Yorkshire who is still many years later in hiding because he chose to use an image of the Prophet Muhammad in his class, which is something which is offensive to Muslims. There was a question mark about whether he should have done it or not. He was clear that he was doing it in a particular context. But the idea that he has feared for his life and had to go into state-supported hiding years later is outrageous.
Well, that's, you know, it's almost as if we already have a blasphemy law in this country. You had another child who was hauled before Muslim elders, and also the police were there as well because he scuffed a Quran at school. I mean, are we already there?
I mean, it is bonkers, because, I mean, the depicting Muhammad thing is only prohibited in Sunni Islam. In Shia Islam, there are centuries of wonderful art and displays, and in Iran there are lots of depictions of the Prophet Muhammad, but just not in the Sunni places. I mean, it seems we've sort of picked a lane here and are enforcing other countries' laws. Bizarre.
Well, Lord Walney, thank you very much indeed. Former Labour MP and former counter-extremism czar. Thank you very much.
Now, it's time for the travel weather. If you're in search of some winter sun, here's the latest forecast.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
There's some wet and windy weather on the way for Iberia over the next couple of days, but higher pressure further east is bringing some sunshine. However, there is still some showers around, particularly across parts of Greece, Cyprus and Turkey. High pressure, though, brings sunshine to parts of Italy and southern France. However, low pressure very much in charge further west, with plenty of rain and strong winds, and those temperatures generally in the mid to high teens for much of Tenerife and the Canary Islands. There is some sunshine on the way and temperatures are on the rise by the time we get to Friday.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A fine day for many out there today. Beautifully sunny again across much of the south. More cloud further north, and a few spots of drizzly rain on this weather front, pushing up against this area of high pressure. That's what's bringing the sunny skies across the south. Where this weather front is lying, it is producing quite a lot of thicker cloud over parts of northern England, north coast of Wales, Northern Ireland. A little bit of drizzly rain here and there, chiefly over the Lake District. Some showers across the Northern Isles of Scotland, but much of Scotland dry. Some brightness to the east of Scotland, some sunshine here. Plenty of sunshine across the south. Temperatures touch above average, getting up to 10, 11 degrees pretty widely. Some places could see temperatures climb into the teens, but with the clear skies tonight, it will turn cold across the south once more. We'll keep quite a bit of cloud across northern areas. Still a few showers just moving into Shetland. Quite breezy across the north. The winds will strengthen further through the night. Thicker clouds with that weather front we saw earlier just across the Lake District, Northern Ireland. A little bit of drizzly rain is possible here. Much of England and Wales, though, staying dry. With these clear skies in the south, temperatures are going to fall away fairly sharply, and like last night, we could well see some fog patches just thickening up through the night. It could be quite dense by morning time. We'll continue with the thicker cloud over northwest England, much of Scotland, and here maybe a little bit of showery rain trickling in, but it will be a much milder night across the north compared to the south. Temperatures in towns and cities down below freezing. Rural spots like last night could be down to -5, -6, maybe -7, and there could be some fog around as well, which could linger through much of the morning tomorrow across the south, but it will be pretty patchy in nature. Another generally sunny day here. Maybe a brighter day for Cumbria, but rain will come into northwest Scotland and getting windy across Scotland through tomorrow. Some gusty conditions, but again, for most, double figures.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
OK, 1:50 is the time. Good afternoon, Britain. Now, yes, another wallop to your wallet. Train fares in England and Wales have risen by 4.6%, despite there being a record low reliability of services.
Oh, good. Well, public transport campaigners have warned that this increase will pile more misery on hard-pressed households, as commuters will have to pay hundreds of pounds more per year for their travel.
OK, we're joined now by GB News West Midlands reporter Jack Carson, who's outside Birmingham New Street Station. How are the public taking this news then, Jack?
It really is a sense of frustration here today when been speaking to commuters today because of this 4.6% increase on regulated rail fares. Also increases to rail cards and season ticket prices as well. Rail cards really seeing a big increase really for just over a decade. So £70 rail card is now going to be £80. 1 year £30 rail card is now going to be £35. And there is a sense from campaigners for the railways that this is further misery on hard-pressed households. That's what the Campaign for Better Transport say. Let's take a little dive into just a couple of the examples of where you'll see increases. So say you're getting a 12-month pass for York to Leeds, that's now £133 more expensive. Say you're getting a season ticket from Gloucester to Birmingham, where I am today, that's going to be an extra £237 a year. So that is really where the increase comes from, and people may be already struggling with increases in energy bills coming in the next few months. That is where the frustrations come from. I was speaking to some commuters this morning. Here's what they've told me.
I think it's disgusting, really. You know, I mean, they're trying to get people to travel on the public transport and they put the fares up.
Lots of trains are still delayed, cancelled. The train I've just been on has been really busy. There's never enough carriages, so then it gets really expensive. It's just, what's the point?
I can't say I'm exactly pleased. I understand that they might need to invest in the infrastructure, but that's been going on for a long time.
Well, you can hear from what people think there. I think there is a lack of correlation between people seeing prices go up but services not doing the same. But the Heidi Alexander, who's the Transport Secretary, says that they recognise, of course, the frustrations people are having, but they say it's going to take time for trust to be restored. They say these price increases will help them invest into the services.
OK, Jack Carson, thank you very much indeed. Outside Birmingham New Street Station for us. I mean, rail travel is becoming a luxury now, isn't it? A luxury. People just can't afford it. So what are you going to do? You're going to have to get in a car or a bus, I don't know, just not commute at all. Is commuting a luxury now? I think it is.
Well, that's a happy assessment there. Happy assessment. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Plenty more to come, of course, on today's programme, so don't move a muscle. We're going to bring you the very latest from West Germany, where, of course, police have confirmed that one person has died and several others have been seriously injured after a car drove into a crowd of people. Of course, this is seeming attack, the latest in a long line of incidents of cars and other vehicles ploughing into crowds of people in Germany, in France, right across Europe, and of course recently in America too. Before all that, the weather.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. After plenty of spring sunshine today, a reminder of winter tonight as a frost reforms, certainly across the south. Further north, there will be more clouds and that will keep the temperatures up. This north-south split being created by high pressure across the south and this old weather front sitting across northern England, Northern Ireland, providing quite a bit of cloud, a little bit of drizzle here and there, especially over the Lake District. And we'll see a few light showers just creeping into western Scotland through the night. But for most, it's a dry night. The showers in Shetland tending to fade. And we'll see the light winds and the clear skies allowing a frost across the south. Rural spots, -5, -6. There'll be some fog as well, particularly across the southeast. So bear that in mind for Tuesday morning's rush hour. Further north, it won't be as cold because there'll be much more cloud around. And that cloud, as I said, thick enough for a little bit of light, showery rain to come into the Highlands and the Western Isles. The breeze will be picking up tomorrow across Scotland. It's been quite blowy this morning, but the wind's easing down through today, but picking up again during tomorrow. Quite a bit of cloud across Northern Ireland, but should be a bit brighter than today across Northern Ireland and Northern England, and certainly across the south. Yes, there will be some fog around, but that should be clearing by mid to late morning, and then we'll see plenty of sunshine again over the Midlands, East Anglia, Southern England and Wales. Generally a brighter day over Northern England. Still a fair bit of cloud, but some hazy sunshine, and then we'll see wet weather, rain coming into the Northern Isles, the Western Isles and the Highlands of Scotland later, and those gusty winds continuing to strengthen across the far north. Temperatures 10, 11, 12 could reach 13 degrees, maybe even 14 in parts of eastern England. The rain will continue to trickle south, turning up across the central belt and some more widely through Northern Ireland during the evening. But again, that'll fizzle out by Wednesday. Most places again dry and bright. It gets even warmer by the time we get to Thursday.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could be one of 2 big winners in our latest giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
Because you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good after Britain. It's good afternoon, Britain. Good before Britain. Good medium Britain as well. It's 2 o'clock on Monday, the 3rd of March, and I'm Tom Harwood.
And we're on live television. Now, in very worrying news, police have confirmed that one person has died and several others have been seriously injured after a car drove into a crowd of people in Mannheim in West Germany. We'll bring you the latest.
Elsewhere, Sir Keir Starmer seeks a coalition of the willing as he offers his plan for peace in Ukraine. But are you willing to cough up yet more money for this war? Well, the Prime Minister will deliver his assessment to a turbulent House of Commons this afternoon.
And it comes as calls grow for Donald Trump's UK state visit to be cancelled following that very public spat with President Zelensky. So is the United States president's stance on Ukraine enough to damage the special relationship, or should he absolutely be here for his state visit? We'll have the latest from Downing Street. Right, we'll get our words out this hour.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's been an absolutely busy weekend. We saw a range of summits and meetings, both on this side of the Atlantic and the other. And we're going to really find out what the conclusion of this Lancaster House emergency summit was. What will the Prime Minister say in his update to the House of Commons?
Yeah, what will he say? Because is it more of the same at the moment from European leaders? The pledging of military aid. Keir Starmer has said before that in the event of a peace deal that British troops, he'd consider putting British troops in harm's way. He seems to reiterate that more and more. But what actually has changed? Does Donald Trump still hold the cards here for an actual negotiation of a peace plan? Because Europe seemed to be relying on on peace sort of coming out of nowhere at this point. Because I don't believe that European leaders are suddenly going to say, OK, that's it, we're going to put tens of thousands of our lads in harm's way and we're going to fight Russia.
No. Well, this is what the American backstop is all about. I don't think we'll get to there being European troops on the ground in Ukraine unless there is this backstop explicitly agreed to by the United States. But in order to negotiate that, the European countries need to go with a sort of united stance, a proposal to Donald Trump. I'm not sure that we've seen that yet. You've got France saying there should be a month-long ceasefire, Britain saying, no, that's not our policy, and then lots of other countries not even spending the NATO minimum of 2% on their armed forces, let alone 3 or 4%, or even 5%, as Donald Trump has suggested.
Yeah, all we've got in the way of a sort of peace plan as it stands is Donald Trump's minerals deal. And it does look as though, from listening to what Zelensky's been saying and also the US administration, that they will meet again to negotiate.
Some sunny day.
Something will be signed at some point. It's not the end. But gbnews.com/your say. Please do get in touch throughout the show. But it is your headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Tom, Emily, thank you. It's just gone 2 o'clock. These are your headlines. Sir Keir Starmer is expected to return to the Commons today for the first time since his diplomatic action across the Atlantic and in London. The Prime Minister told European leaders we are at a crossroads in our history. At an emergency summit in London last night, European nations met with the aim to secure lasting peace in Ukraine.
The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air, together with others. Europe must do the heavy lifting.
Sir Keir Starmer announced a 4-point plan to work with Ukraine to end the war and defend the country from Russia. The UK, France and other countries will step up their efforts in a coalition of the willing and seek to involve the US in their support for Ukraine. And in a royal show of solidarity, Zelensky received a warm welcome at Sandringham as he met the King yesterday. Meanwhile, President Zelensky has today shared a video showing damage caused by Russian attacks on Ukraine in the past few days, saying they show Vladimir Putin does not want the war to end. He added that those who want negotiations do not deliberately hit people with ballistic missiles. And Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for the Armed Forces, Luke Pollard, told GB News the UK must act as a bridge between the US and Europe.
Really important that we stand with our allies. The US is our most important security partner. I see it every day as a defence minister, but it's also right that at these difficult times that the UK acts as that bridge between the USA and our friends in Europe to bring together the plan for a lasting and durable peace in Ukraine, because all of us, President Trump, the UK Prime Minister, President Zelensky, want to see a peace that lasts, a deal that can be stuck to, so the Ukrainian people can know that they will never be invaded by Russia again.
Meanwhile, Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs, Wendy Morton, called for more clarity from the Prime Minister.
It's about very much the UK building on the work, the role that we've had in terms of Ukraine, the start of the war, and even before that, very much as a close ally of Ukraine, but also as a really strong ally of the US as well. And this is about finding a way forward. But equally, I think it's also important that, you know, for shadow ministers like myself, for the Her Majesty's opposition, we need a little bit more detail and a little bit more clarity about what was agreed at the summit, and so we're hoping that we will see that this afternoon when the Prime Minister comes to the House of Commons.
Elsewhere, the King has met with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at Sandringham House. The private audience this morning came just a day after King Charles welcomed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to his Norfolk estate. King Charles was pictured shaking hands with the Canadian leader, with Mr. Trudeau warmly clasping the King's hands with both of his. In other news, one person has died and several are injured after a car drove into a crowd of people in the German city of Mannheim this morning. A police spokesperson has confirmed this, adding that one suspect has now been arrested. The official said it was unclear whether there were any other suspects involved. The police are appealing to the public to stay at home. The incident occurred as crowds gathered in cities across the regions, including Germany's Rhineland, for parades to mark the carnival season. It's understood a black SUV drove at high speed into people travelling from the centrally located Paradeplatz Square towards the city's landmark water tower. Now, a 26-year-old man who murdered his ex-girlfriend and her sister with a crossbow before stabbing their mother to death is set to stand trial accused of rape. Carl Clifford, who tied Louise Hunt with duct tape before shooting her and her sister Hannah at their family home in Hertfordshire last July, denies a further charge of raping Louise. Their mother, Carol, wife of BBC commentator John Hunt, was stabbed to death, with Hannah calling police moments before she died. Clifford is set to stand trial at Cambridge Crown Court for the charge of rape today. And renowned Scottish painter Jack Vetriano has died at the age of 73. The artist was found dead at his apartment in Nice in the south of France on Saturday. It is understood there are no suspicious circumstances around his death. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Right, it's 2:08 and we're going to go back to the news coming into us from Mannheim in Germany. Police have now confirmed that one person has died, several others are seriously injured after a car drove into a crowd. Well, a car was driven into a crowd in the city Mannheim.
Well, let's get the very latest from our national reporter, Charlie Peters, because we've been learning more over the course of the last hour.
The police are now saying that a suspect is in custody, although at this time it's unclear if any others were involved. We don't know if this was a lone wolf incident. After it has all the warnings and indicators, all the evidence points at this stage where it's highly likely a targeted attack based on what we've seen in several other occasions in Germany in recent years, indeed in recent months. A car ramming attack in Munich last month and one at a Christmas market in Magdeburg in December. But this incident today happening around noon in Mannheim in its Paradeplatz, and it's the start of carnival season in Germany. There was a parade organised on Sunday in Mannheim, and several others were lined up for today. The German Interior Minister, Nancy Faeser, she's cancelled her participation in a carnival parade in Cologne and was being briefed on the incident. A spokesperson said that the rescue of human lives, care of the injured and the initial investigations by the authorities in Mannheim are now the priority. So what's happened? Incident, it's said, occurred at noon when a black SUV is said to have been driven at high speed into this crowd right in the city centre. It's the main part of the town, the Paradeplatz. Some reports that it started driving from a water tower not too far away from the square and accelerating into the crowd, driving at high speed, although those reports are from eyewitnesses reported by local media. There were some reports of a manhunt, but the police at this point are saying that a suspect is in custody. Now, this comes after several carnivals were cancelled and festivals were cancelled in Cologne, in Rotterdam and also in Nuremberg after social media accounts linked to the terrorist organisation ISIS had made threats against them. But it appears that in Mannheim is the first such security incident related to these carnival events. So several others cancelled, and a day after the main event in Mannheim, we've had this car ramming incident in the city centre.
No, it is just the most extraordinary event, and perhaps the most extraordinary thing about it is how unextraordinary these things are becoming. Yeah. That this is becoming the ordinary for so many cities in Europe. Of course, we don't know the motivations. We don't know anything about the man who has now been arrested. But we have seen Islamist terror attacks follow this playbook time and time and time again. Yeah, it's a truly shocking incident, but it should be more shocking than it is, as you say, Tom, because of how consistent this is. Now, as we said, Germany has suffered a number of recent attacks. Last month, a mother and her 2-year-old daughter were killed in a car ramming attack in Munich. A 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker was arrested. In January, a 2-year-old boy and a 41-year-old man were stabbed to death in Aschaffenburg, in the same area as Munich in Bavaria. And a 28-year-old man, also from Afghanistan, was arrested over that. In December, 6 killed, 299 injured after a man drove a car into a Christmas market. 29 injured after a man drove a car into a Christmas market in Magdeburg. The suspect, a 50-year-old Saudi asylum seeker who had criticised Islam on social media posts. And in August, 3 people were killed and another 8 injured in a knife attack in Solingen. Authorities there saying that there was a Syrian suspect, also suspected of being a supporter of the Islamic State group. And also, back to Mannheim, 1 year later, there was an incident in Mannheim where 6 were stabbed, also by an Afghan asylum seeker, and a police officer was killed in that incident. I mean, this is just from the last year, not even the last full year. So many major security incidents in Germany in the last 365 days, which has put a lot of strain on the country's political situation, but has also meant that people just aren't surprised anymore when these incidents happen.
Yeah, well, it's clear European politicians have failed to keep us safe, unfortunately. Charlie Peters, thank you very much, our national reporter. Please do bring us any more updates when you get them. As we understand, 1 person has been confirmed to have died. Now, in other news, this afternoon, the Prime Minister will take to his feet in the House of Commons to deliver his assessment of what's been a turbulent weekend. He'll tell MPs what the emergency summit with European leaders at Lancaster House actually decided in the end, and also his meeting with Donald Trump.
Well, the PM will face fierce questioning on how he's handled the US President, the offer, of course, of a prestigious second state visit and fresh aid to Ukraine. Also, whether we will see British troops on the ground in Ukraine for the first time since the days of Florence Nightingale.
Yes, and at the emergency summit yesterday afternoon, Keir Starmer did commit those British boots to the ground in the event of a peace deal.
The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air, together with others. Europe must do the heavy lifting.
Well, let's get more on this now with our political editor, Chris Hope, who is live on Downing Street for us. Chris, a big day for the Prime Minister after a turbulent weekend.
That's right, Tom and Emily, that's right. But behind me, he's preparing to go to Parliament for around 3:30 p.m. and watch that statement to MPs live on GB News. It's been a huge time since he was last there. PMQs last Wednesday seems a distant memory. Back then, we were discussing cutting the aid budget, spending $6 billion more on defence from 2027. Well, questions now from MPs, why wait till 2027? And when will those boots go beyond the ground in the UK, as you say there? Big questions, I think, for the Prime Minister to answer. John Healey, who's the Defence Secretary, he's flying to America this week to meet with Pete Hegseth, who's his US counterpart. What's in his briefcase? It could well be a possible plan to have a month-long truce. That's being pushed by France. The UK says today in a briefing with journalists that is one of the options. There clearly are a number of options, they say, on the table. The intense work is ongoing. Will the PM go to the White House again? Not ruled out. Whatever's necessary they will do, they say, to make progress. No comment on the remarks from Peter Mandelson, who's calling for a unilateral peace deal declared by Ukraine, and how that might work, we don't know. So far, our country has spent £13.8 billion of taxpayers' money in grants and loans on the war in Ukraine. There is there's no need yet from the government. They're saying they're not going to get that back from Ukraine. We look at America and see how they're getting a stake if they do a deal. They're getting a stake in precious rare earth for making sort of tech. We are not getting a similar deal. We asked in the briefing this morning about this. They say that Ukraine's security is UK security. Defending Ukraine is absolutely critical to our security. And just finally, breaking in the America in the past hour, the New York Times reports that Donald Trump is expected to meet today with his advisors about withdrawing on cancelling military aid to Ukraine. He's meeting with Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, who of course is meeting John Healey in coming days, looking at a range of options, including cancelling military aid sanctioned by Joe Biden when he was the President of the United States. So if this is not over, it just gets more and more complicated. And in the middle of this is our Prime Minister trying to navigate a peace. But the first the negotiations, before we even get to Putin, are with America.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much indeed, Christopher Hope, there on Downing Street ahead of Keir Starmer's address to the House of Commons, let's say. Well, we're now joined by an international relations researcher and head of the Centre for Applied History at the MCC Budapest, Ralph Schellhammer. Ralph, thank you very much indeed. Now, Keir Starmer has said, our Prime Minister has said that Europe now needs to do the heavy lifting when it comes to European security and keeping Ukraine safe. Do you believe that Europe are actually ready and willing to do so?
Oh, no, I don't think so. And I believe that Europeans themselves know that. If you keep in mind, during the last largest summit in Europe, in Paris, pretty much every idea that was proposed ended with the sentence, and there needs to be a backstop from the United States. So even European leaders, if you listen to their entire speeches, also the entire length of their plans, usually tend to say that everything they want to do needs the commitment and the support of the United States. So I commend Keir Starmer for his honesty in this regard. And I think Mr. Starmer also knows very well that the number of troops that the UK could provide would not be enough to ensure either a demilitarized zone or a lasting peace. So the problem Europe has, and this goes back, by the way, to 2011, when then US Defense Minister Gates sent a letter to the Europeans saying, you people need to spend more on your military. The United States are not going to pick up the tab forever. Unfortunately, nothing happened in those 14 years. And now the bill is coming due, and it looks very bleak, I have to say.
And yet, what we heard coming out of the summit in London yesterday was a sort of speculation that there's been this behind-closed-doors agreement about increasing defence spending, that each country would not announce this together as a group, but each will announce something in their own way to their own populations in their own time. But it does seem that there has been some sort of general agreement that defence spending will have to rise in all of these European countries.
Well, I completely agree with you, and I think you read this correctly. But the problem is that something that is agreed upon or the intention that are being announced are not the same thing as this actually being happening. And the problem is, and this is what I think many commentators are missing, The problem in Europe is not just a problem of finance, it's a problem of industry. So even if Germany, for example, says we're going to spend more on defense, if France says we're going to spend more on defense, the problem is, what are they going to spend that money on? Without heavy industry, without blast furnaces, without cheap electricity, you cannot use that money to actually gear up for war. Well, whether one is for this or against this is a separate debate, but is even the capacity there? And I think we no longer have the industrial capacity, and that is the issue with Russia. Right? Russia is overall economically weaker than Europe. But of course, their entire economy is geared towards war, which we at the moment and on the short run cannot do. So they do have an advantage, and I'm afraid that the Russians know this quite well.
Well, that's why I found myself quite frustrated on Friday night when every single leader in Europe, it seemed, and most journalists and most commentators on the issue all immediately took to Twitter and everything to say, we stand with Ukraine, we will never let you down, we will always be there for you, we will stand behind you in all of this, which is fantastic and great. But will they actually, or are we actually going to be relying on the United States to broker a peace deal? Because at this point, we're not quite sure what any type of peace plan coming from Europe actually is.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's a moral reality, I think, that we all agree upon, that, one country invading another country is wrong, but you don't want to redraw the borders by military means. But then there's also the political and economic reality, and this is that Europe, to a certain extent, not all countries, Poland, for example, would be an exception to this, but more or less we got comfortable in the idea that war is something of the past, that only happens at the fringes of the world, if you want, but not in the heart of Central Europe, and that bet was wrong. And now catching up to reality will need time, and it will need money, and it will need industry. Just one last point. People always make the comparison to Munich in 1938. But I would like to point out that Britain in 1938 was not ready to go to war with Germany, which is why they needed time to rearm. And I think the same is true now. We cannot go. Nobody wants it, by the way. I'm not commending it, but hypothetically, we could not enter a conflict with Russia because we do not have the means at the moment. And both of you said it very well. Tweeting is nice and social media is very nice, but wars are not won on social media, but on the battlefield. And that situation, unfortunately, is very bleak.
That is such an important point. Neville Chamberlain gets a very bad rap in the press.
Unjustifiably, yeah.
But Britain didn't have any meaningful military capability. I mean, we'd been getting our army smaller and smaller and smaller until the mid-1930s, at which point we realised the danger of the world started to ramp up. But by 1938, nowhere near close. Frankly, by 1940, not even close either. But Ralph Scholhammer, thanks so much for talking through what is a concerning situation there for all of Europe.
Yeah, do you think it's just because there's more of a political win, an obvious political win, when you put money towards, I don't know, welfare or
schools and hospitals, always schools
and all
and
of this, and then it's like, oh, oops, we kind of need some on defence now. Need a few more missiles and the like.
Well, if you would like to, perhaps not... I'm trying to think of a link between missiles and this.
Shoot yourself up into space.
Oh, I don't know. Well, do you know what? It's the final week to see if you could win an amazing prize bundle in each of our latest giveaways. Each one has a brand new iPhone 16, £500 in shopping vouchers and a whopping 10,000 quid in tax-free cash. Hurry, lines close on Friday.
It's the final week to see how you could be one of two big winners in our latest giveaway, as we have two prize bundles that have to be won. There's two lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, joining us in the studio now is Chia Eaglin and Erin Cobb from Clark's Farm Greyhound Rescue, who have brought along 2 very special guests. This is Duchess.
So Duchess is the one I'm stroking. This is Duchess, isn't it? Our lady joining us this morning, and then over there is Vieira.
Vieira's a chap, isn't he? And Duchess is a lady. So,
talk to us about their history. Now, they used to be racing dogs, didn't they? But now they're looking for a home.
Yeah, so both of these dogs were racing greyhounds. They have retired recently. So now we are getting them ready and prepared to go into a forever home, essentially.
So anyone watching, make sure you get on the Clark's Farm website later on today, because these guys are up for adoption. And I mean,
and they are very cute.
Look how well behaved they are as well. They were a little bit excited when they came in because it's their first time on TV and they wanted to make a good impression.
They did.
Now
they're both looking, aren't they? They know what's up on
yawning already.
Here. Now, talk to us about greyhounds as a breed. If anyone was going to adopt a greyhound, what would they expect?
I'd say the first thing is couch potatoes. They are the most lazy dog ever.
Really? You wouldn't expect that because of the background.
Everyone has this massive misconception that they need loads of exercise, loads of walks, but they are actually, you know, quite happy with 2 20-minute walks a day. They are so like that.
Yeah.
Easy.
That's
as long as they're able to have their moments of madness, zoomies, you know, they do get the sillies, of course. But once they've had that, they are so happy to just chill out on the sofa with you. Usually,
they've all got different personalities, and it's just great to see. Even though some of them,
Duchess just perched on the back of your head.
Duchess is going to fall asleep. You're on TV, Duchess.
She's watching.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 26 minutes past 2, and today marks the 40th anniversary of the end of the year-long miners' strike.
Yes, a wave of pit closures followed, and almost all of Britain's deep coal mines were shut within the next 20 years.
Well, it paved the way for the privatisation of nationalised industries, including steel, railways, gas, telecoms and water.
Well, our reporter Anna Riley has spoken to former miners in South Yorkshire about their lasting legacy.
We pedalled and I got it all.
Good old days.
Sharing memories of the pit over a pint. March the 3rd, 1985 marked the end of year-long coal mining strikes. And 40 years on, these former South Yorkshire miners reflect on the end of an era.
We voted to strike. We thought it might be only for a few weeks or something like that, and obviously a year later we came away obviously without a victory. We just went back and we just had to build up with lives again, and it's a shame that it's had to come to an end, knowing that there's still coal down there to be mined. I mean, Redishire Park, I don't know if I've heard it right, there's about 14 years of coal left down there, so 14 years of coal just lost.
If you ask me to go back, I'll go back. But now it's gone, and you know, it's faint memories such. But you have good memories of who you work with and whatnot. Yeah, it's sad that it closed, but you have to start another. You know, you can't dwell on it. You have to start and get on with what you've got. Like,
as parents, grandparents, it's what people were brought up with. You know, I don't think you get that sort of camaraderie now. I mean, I've had a lot of jobs since, foundries and what have you, and gas areas, and it's not the same.
With the mines came the miners' clubs, and here in Renishaw, the miners' welfare is still thriving.
It was very hard at the time, and whilst we've got no mining in the village now, and not for a very long time, we do all we can to keep that community spirit going. We recognise the importance of keeping the heritage alive, and we want the younger generation to know where they come from.
Cheers. All the best. All the best. Up the miners.
Although coal mines eventually closed, the community spirit in former pit towns like this one is here to stay. Anna Riley, GB News.
OK, that was Anna Riley. But we're now joined by Gordon Nicholson, who lives in the former mining town of Stanley in County Durham. Gordon, thank you very much. We met before when I came up for the day, so it's great to have you back.
Did, yes.
Yeah, it's great to have you back on the channel. Now, you live in Stanley, former mining town. Do you still see the legacy today?
Yes, we've got a couple of little monuments where dedicated to where we had the pit disasters. And we have the Durham Miners Gala every year, which brings out all the old banners from all the pits. And it's a big event that happens literally, I think it's every July. But it still keeps going. It's nobody ever forgets them. And they just love it up here still.
And yet, of course, the closure of the industry has been really tough for places like Stanley, for many former mining areas in the country. When that industry dries up, so to speak, it's sometimes very hard to sort of centrally direct jobs and opportunities and employment to go to that specific area before. We saw it with the gold rush in the United States. You know, you'd move to a place with gold, you'd dig all the gold. When it was gone, people would move on to a new settlement. But we sort of have a greater attachment to areas and land in this country, and that can bring with it economic troubles.
Yeah, I mean, it devastated this town when they eventually closed all the pits around here. But a lot of the miners had to move away. They had to move down south to where jobs were, because there wasn't the work here to accommodate them all. I mean, I moved myself 2 years, I think it was in '87, I moved down to Hertfordshire just to find work, because you couldn't get a job up here. There's that many people leaving the pits, or the pits were winding down, and they had to find other employment. But there was nothing here, and there's never been anything invested in this area to compensate for that. And a lot of the pit villages, not just in here, but around the country, are all in the same boat.
Yeah, and Gordon, I remember us talking about, in the context of the winter fuel payments being taken away from a lot of pensioners, about how you know, there's a level of poverty in areas like Stanley and other former mining towns, that people who are left in those areas, not a huge amount of opportunities in terms of jobs. I mean, what are the jobs going in Stanley at the moment? What sort of things can people do?
If you want to go and Deliveroo or deliver from McDonald's and pizza shops, they're always available, but proper, real, potential hard-working jobs are very, very limited.
Yeah. Well, Gordon Nicholson, thanks indeed for joining us and sharing your experience of a town. I mean, 40 years on, and clearly that legacy still is deep.
Yeah, you don't get that sense of community, do you, from a delivery driving job as you would from you know, being down the mines with your friends all the time. Thank you, Gordon Nicholson. Cheers. Thank you very much.
You're
Have a
welcome.
good one. Have a good afternoon. Nice to see you again. That was Gordon Nicholson from Stanley in County Durham.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Plenty more to come on today's show. Indeed, we're building up to Starmer's big address to the House of Commons and hearing from the DUP leader, Gavin Robinson. These missiles will, of course, be being built in Northern Ireland. That after your headlines with Sophia.
Your headlines at 2:33. Sir Keir Starmer is expected to return to the Commons today for the first time since his diplomatic action across the Atlantic. The Prime Minister told European leaders we are at a crossroads in history At an emergency summit in London last night, European nations met with the aim to secure lasting peace in Ukraine.
The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting.
Sir Keir Starmer announced a 4-point plan to work with Ukraine to end the war and defend the country from Russia. The UK, France and other countries will step up their efforts in a coalition of the willing and seek to involve the US in their support for Ukraine. And in a royal show of solidarity, Zelensky received a warm welcome at Sandringham as he met the King yesterday. Meanwhile, Ukraine's president has today shared a video showing damage caused by Russian attacks on Ukraine in the past few days, saying they show Vladimir Putin does not want the war to end. He added that those who want negotiations do not deliberately hit people with ballistic missiles. Now, one person has died and several are severely injured after a car drove into a crowd of people in the German city of Mannheim. Police confirmed that one suspect has now been arrested. The official said it was unclear whether any other suspects were involved. The police is appealing to the public to stay at home. The incident occurred as crowds gathered in the cities across regions, including Germany's Rhineland, for parades to mark the carnival season. It's understood a black SUV drove at high speed into people travelling from the centrally located Paradeplatz Square towards the city's landmark water tower. Back in the UK, a police investigation has been launched after a member of the public discovered human remains. Police were called to reports of the skeletal discovery in Stoke-on-Trent on Sunday afternoon. The area is cordoned off as police examined the scene. And renowned Scottish painter Jack Vetriano has died at the age of 73. That's according to his publicist. The artist was found dead at his apartment in Nice in the south of France on Saturday. It is understood there are no suspicious circumstances around his death. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Sam Francis will have more for you in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. Orkney ferry sailings are suspended between Egglesay and Wyre because of high winds and tidal conditions. Buses replaced trains between Bishop Auckland and Darlington because of overrunning engineering works. The M62 in Greater Manchester is closed westbound at junction 19 at Hayward after an accident. There are queues back beyond junction 22 at Rishworth Moor, and long delays too on routes through Rochdale and Oldham as you divert. Train services are suspended between Hereford and Ledbury, and they've been stopped between Hereford and Great Malvern after a vehicle hit a bridge. The M11 in Cambridgeshire is closed northbound at junction 11 for the A10 south of Cambridge after an accident and oil spill. Queues from junction 10 at Duxford. In Bedfordshire, the A5183 is closed south of Dunstable after an accident, and there's disruption to some flights at Gatwick Airport after problems earlier with fog.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 39 minutes past 2. Now, train fares in England and Wales have risen by 4.6%. That's, of course, above inflation, despite there being a record low reliability of services.
Yes, and public transport campaigners have warned that this increase will pile more misery on hard-pressed households, as commuters will have to pay hundreds of pounds more per year to travel. Is there anything more depressing than paying through the nose to get to work?
Well, let's head straight to Birmingham New Street Station and speak to our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson. Jack, I imagine people not best pleased.
Yeah, a lot of frustration, certainly, this morning when I was speaking to commuters, and a lot of feeling that they don't trust that the system and the services will get better. The government say that this 4.6% price increase on regulated rail fares, that includes things like season tickets, also things like some off-peak returns on long-distance journeys, flexible tickets for travelling in and out of cities. So what a lot of people, who may be hybrid work and only need to go into a city a few days a week that will use, they are all increasing. The government said that these price increases are to ensure that investment can be made in the rail system. But as I've been finding out today, there is not necessarily the trust there that commuters that use the railways believe that those services will get better. There seems to be a lack of correlation between the amount of money people feel they are paying and the services they're getting. Here's what they told me this morning when I caught them coming off the train.
I think it's disgusting, really. They're trying to get people to travel on the public transport and they put the fares up.
Lots of trains are still delayed, cancelled. The train I've just been on is being really busy. There's never enough carriages, so then it's really expensive. It's just, what's the point?
I can't say I'm exactly pleased. I understand that they might need to invest in the infrastructure, but that's been going on for a long time.
You can hear the frustration there, and this price rise coming, as we found out just a couple of weeks ago, around the amount of services being cancelled in the past year in the UK. So 1 in 25 services were cancelled. That means and equates to around 217,000, according to the Office and Rail and Road reports. But the government said that this increase is needed for the investment, as I was mentioning, saying that the government inherited a railway that was not fit for purpose. That's what Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary, says, and she says it will take time for trust to be restored, for trains to turn up time and where they are needed. But there is worry that this adds more misery for people who are already struggling with the cost of living, and in a few weeks' time increasing energy prices too.
Thank you very much indeed, Jack Carson there outside Birmingham New Street Station. Another 4.6%. Maybe one day we'll hear, oh, train fares have gone down.
Yeah, but we won't, because fewer people are riding the trains. And, if you used to have...
It's self-fulfilling, isn't it?
If you used to have people... Before COVID, you had commuters go in 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Now they'll go in 3 days a week.
If that.
If that. And so if fewer people are using the trains, the amount of revenue these companies have been generating has been falling and falling and falling and falling. I mean, how else do they even maintain the level of service? They need to get more money in. How else do they do it?
I mean, people move out of city centres to try and save money on their rent or their mortgage or whatever and everything else. And then they find that actually commuting into their old office is going to, is going to take up all the difference.
Yeah.
I mean, pathetic state of affairs.
But I mean, how do we square the circle? I mean, unless we somehow move back to the pre-COVID world, where people took trains a lot more regularly. I mean, if we are living in the world...
Axe all the unnecessary jobs. Maybe that sounds harsh, but there are some unnecessary jobs, aren't there, on the rail?
On the railways, they still use fax machines.
Yeah, I mean, that's not helping, is it?
They are, but it's written into the contract. So the reason why they can't get rid of the fax machines, you'd think an administrator could just go into the company and say, stop using fax machines, it's ridiculously inefficient. And some of their working practices where they need like 3 or 4 different experts to attend a job that could be done by one person, all written into the union agreements.
Yeah.
And the problem is, if you want to change one of these things, the unions say, well, then you have to renegotiate the entire agreement. And so the fax machines stay, and the multiple people attending a job that could be done with just one person stays.
I think the rail unions are the most effective at making sure there are no changes ever to their working conditions. And the Labour government just rolled over, didn't they? It was one of the first things that they did was, all right, you don't need to improve your productivity.
Yeah.
You know, if someone interrupts you during your tea break, you could start it again, or your lunch break or whatever it is. No problems, no problems. And we need 1,000 people looking out for tickets, you know, everywhere, even though, you know, most people do it on their phones now. No worries, no worries.
I mean, it is completely...
They're good bully boys, aren't they, the rail
bonkers.
unions?
And, I mean, it's just completely bonkers of the government to have given them so much more money for literally nothing in return.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, well.
There we go. That's how things work, apparently. Anyway, we're going to bring you some live shots to build up the suspense of the House of Commons, because, of course, Keir Starmer is going to be addressing MPs there very shortly indeed. And there's probably going to be quite a lot of questions in terms of the relationship with Trump now. Will he be getting this state visit? Will we be rolling out the red carpet for Donald Trump? Where is this £1.6 billion exactly going to go? That we've promised to Ukraine, and British troops on the ground. Where exactly will they be, and what's the time frame there?
No, big questions indeed. But shall we get an update on the travel weather, of course? If you're in for search for some winter sun, here are the top European destinations.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
There's some wet and windy weather on the way for Iberia over the next couple of days, but higher pressure further east is bringing some sunshine. However, there is still some showers around, particularly across parts of Greece, Cyprus and Turkey. High pressure, though, brings sunshine to parts of Italy and southern France. However, low pressure very much in charge further west, with plenty of rain and strong winds, and those temperatures generally in the mid to high teens for much of Tenerife and the Canary Islands. There is some sunshine on the way, and temperatures are on the rise by the time we get to Friday.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A fine day for many out there today. Beautifully sunny again across much of the south. More cloud further north, and a few spots of drizzly rain on this weather front, pushing up against this area of high pressure. That's what's bringing the sunny skies across the south. Where this weather front is lying, it is producing quite a lot of thicker cloud over parts of northern England, north coast of Wales, Northern Ireland. A little bit of drizzly rain here and there, chiefly over the Lake District. Some showers across the Northern Isles of Scotland, but much of Scotland dry. Some brightness to the east of Scotland, some sunshine here. Plenty of sunshine across the south. Temperatures touch above average, getting up to 10, 11 degrees pretty widely. Some places could see temperatures climb into the teens, but with the clear skies tonight, it will turn cold across the south once more. We'll keep quite a bit of cloud across northern areas. Still a few showers just moving into Shetland. Quite breezy across the north. The winds will strengthen further through the night. Thicker clouds with that weather front we saw earlier just across the Lake District, Northern Ireland. A little bit of drizzly rain is possible here. Much of England and Wales, though, staying dry. With these clear skies in the south, temperatures are going to fall away fairly sharply, and like last night, we could well see some fog patches just thickening up through the night. It could be quite dense by morning time. We'll continue with the thicker cloud over northwest England, much of Scotland, and here maybe a little bit of showery rain trickling in, but it will be a much milder night across the north compared to the south. Temperatures in towns and cities down below freezing. Rural spots like last night could be down to -5, -6, maybe -7, and there could be some fog around as well, which could linger through much of the morning tomorrow across the south, but it will be pretty patchy in nature. Another generally sunny day here. Maybe a brighter day for Cumbria, but rain will come into northwest Scotland and getting windy across Scotland through tomorrow. Some gusty conditions, but again, for most, double figures.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day.
Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 10 to 3. Now, around 5,000 air defence missiles will be made in Northern Ireland, all as part of a £1.6 billion deal the UK has signed with Ukraine.
Yes, this is the largest contract ever received by Thales in Belfast and will support 700 existing jobs and apparently create a further 200 in this sector. Shall we speak with GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie, who knows a bit more about this. Doogie, cause for celebration?
Well, it is a celebration on one side and quite concerning on the other. Thales Systems has been formerly part of the Shorts Brothers aviation group back in the 1930s. 1950s, it started up a missile weapons division here. And of course, Short Brothers was famously part of the SC-1, which was the forerunner to the Harrier jump jet that fought so well. So they have this really good way of producing weapons for a battlefield and realising what the soldiers or the Air Force need in those areas. This is a precision engineering works. In fact, it's worth about 150 million to the UK's GDP every year, 81 million of that coming from out behind us here, and it supplies about £6 million worth of business to local businesses in Northern Ireland. So on that side, it is very good news. On the other side, of course, it is when they're producing weapons to this volume, it's really quite sad for those that are on the other end of it. But of course, that is how the world works, unfortunately, and Thales Systems will of course see the benefits of that. And earlier on, I spoke to the East Belfast MP and leader of the DUP, Gavin Robertson.
I think it's a hugely significant order. It builds on not only the work that has been done to encourage defence contribution, defence spend in Northern Ireland, but it also recognises the significant contribution that Thales has made to the ongoing efforts in Ukraine. Prior to the invasion, NLAWs from Belfast were sent to Ukraine and were necessary but vital in the defence of that country. In fact, Ukraine would have fallen had it not been for the contribution from Belfast in the early phases. And whilst international coalitions have increased and contributions have been made from a wide range of countries and companies with a wide range of capability, the Belfast contribution has continued to grow. It is of vital importance.
Well, you can hear there from Gavin Robertson talking about the jobs that are coming here, but of course it puts much more into the scope right across the UK and indeed across Europe. In the 1980s, we really stopped manufacturing on such scales. Northern Ireland was quite specific in what they produced, so luckily enough, those precision engineers are still trained, they're still here, but it really does bring in things like security, and in particular food security we're talking about, and really how the UK must look at how it must not depend on others and really use factories like this behind us to really bolster its own defence.
Shifting away from just the importance of protecting Ukraine to actually how upping the defence and boosting it in this way will actually help our economy, Doogie.
Well, it does, and I've said to you, £6 million worth of extra cash floating about the economy in Northern Ireland from this factory behind us. The amount of jobs that they supply and the amount of tax receipts, the very important tax receipts that things like the Northern Ireland Executive depend on for their block grant when it all goes into the centre of the UK. So really, it's not only a conversation about Ukraine, it really is about a conversation of how we educate our children. Are we putting them down the road towards manufacturing or sending them into office jobs? jobs. That is really what Britain should be looking at now, and this company behind us is really leading the charge in that. And of course the other weapons system just across, not too far away from here, about 3 miles, is the Star Streak systems. They produce massively for the American markets as well. So really there is a lot of clever lads in Northern Ireland and a lot of skilled labour that was handed down from generation to generation. And it really is vitally important at this time as we see those powers in the world changing.
Really important stuff, although I'm not sure that £1.6 billion for a few hundred jobs quite works out with the maths. I'm sure that these missiles are fairly expensive, or these people are very well paid.
Yeah, or go so elsewhere as well. Thank you for watching A Good Afternoon Britain. You're going to want to stick around, see what Keir Starmer has to say to the House of Commons. That's next with Martin.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. After plenty of spring sunshine today, a reminder of winter tonight as a frost reforms, certainly across the south. Further north, there will be more clouds and that will keep the temperatures up. This north-south split being created by high pressure across the south and this old weather front sitting across northern England, Northern Ireland, providing quite a bit of cloud, a little bit of drizzle here and there, especially over the Lake District. And we'll see a few light showers just creeping into western Scotland through the night. But for most, it's a dry night. The showers in Shetland tending to fade. And we'll see the light winds and the clear skies allowing a frost across the south. Rural spots, -5, -6. There'll be some fog as well, particularly across the southeast. So bear that in mind for Tuesday morning's rush hour. Further north, it won't be as cold because there'll be much more cloud around. And that cloud, as I said, thick enough for a little bit of light, showery rain to come into the Highlands and the Western Isles. The breeze will be picking up tomorrow across Scotland. It's been quite blowy this morning, but the wind's easing down through today, but picking up again during tomorrow. Quite a bit of cloud across Northern Ireland, but should be a bit brighter than today across